Retro Gaming Radio 2005. Keep it retro. Welcome to Retro Gaming Radio. I'm Shane Armin, your host.
Retro Gaming Radio. Retro Gaming Radio.
Today we have a couple of games based on the Quake 2 engine.
Kimberly, come in. Okay.
You're now listening to Retro Gaming Radio. Retro Gaming Radio.
And you're listening to Retro Gaming Radio.
Welcome to the program. Retro Gaming Radio 2005. Shane Armin, Bryan Smith behind the keyboard. Keep it retro.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the October 2004 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. This is Shane R. Monroe, your host. Bryan Kid Hype Smith behind the mixing board. Welcome to the October show that almost wasn't the October show. As many of you know, I was down sick for a couple of weeks in here, and I'm just barely getting my voice back now. So we'll do what we can here. I think we can get through the show. We have a very exciting show, speaking of which, this month. We have our editorial commentary, Hat Tip versus Theft. I think you guys will find that interesting. We're also going to interview Don Daglow. You'll recognize him. He was at Classic Gaming Expo. We have a great interview with him. We also have an enormous Bits and Bytes section. We have tons of people writing in and giving us goodies. We're going to get through each and every one of them. We're also going to introduce a new segment this month called the Pinball Parlor. Bryan and I are going to look at the Lord of the Rings pinball from Stern. All of this plus so much more this month on Retro Gaming Radio. Before I get into our editorial commentary, last month I meant to make a couple of announcements, but in my normal sucky self, I failed to do so. First of all, for those of you who are Studio Pass holders, which of course is free, you can just sign up on the site, we are offering Bryan's super cool arcade game music megamix MP3 file called Arcade Turntablism. And it is truly cool. For those of you who own the Year 5 DVD-ROMs, you've probably already heard it. It's one of the unlockables inside the DVD, and if you scoured around the DVD, you probably found it already. Very cool. It's probably the best arcade mix I've heard yet. Free download for Studio Pass holders. So jump onto your My Studio Pass page, and you can get the goods right now. I think you'll like it a lot. Nice work to Bryan on that one. Also, what we'd like to do starting this month is every month we're going to reveal where one of the 8 Easter eggs is hidden on the Retro Gaming Radio Year 5 DVD-ROMs. So this month we're going to reveal to you one of those hidden Easter eggs. If you go to the interviews from the main menu, well, launch the Year 5 interface first. If you've got the Year 5 compilation, you'll want to go to the Year 5 interface. Select the interviews and go to Todd Rogers number 2. Place your pointer between the Retro Gaming and Radio at the top in the blue banner and slowly move your mouse pointer down about an inch down into the black, and a little hidden spot will highlight. If you click that, you'll get to one of the 8 possible hidden Easter eggs inside the DVD-ROM title. I think you'll enjoy it. It's a little unfinished proof of concept that I was putting together. It's if nothing else, entertaining. And there are 7 more, folks, so see if you can find those. Next month, we'll be back with another hidden Easter egg on the Year 5 Retro Gaming Radio DVD-ROM. This month's editorial commentary is about hat tipping versus theft. There's a brand new threat to classic gaming. And this is a similar threat to the name whoring problem that we've had. You know what I'm talking about. When you buy a game called Spy Hunter for the PlayStation 2, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the original game of Spy Hunter, it makes you wonder how and why they bother to do that. Now, I've covered name whoring extensively on previous episodes, so listen to the back episodes if you want to hear about that. There is a new threat to the classic gaming integrity, and it's called theft. What they would probably call it is hat tipping. Unfortunately, there's a vast difference between hat tipping and theft, and let me explain. Hat tipping is when you give a nod or a reference to something previous, usually in respect or out of respect for the previous endeavor. For example, the horrible Christmas Vacation 2 that just came out, featuring Cousin Eddie's Christmas Island Getaway or something to that effect, right? Inside that movie, if you remember European Vacation, they brought back Eric Idle, the Eric Idle character, and he runs into Eddie. That's a hat tip. They were nice enough to bring a little somebody back from a completely, from one of the other movies, just to bring it back to say, hey, it's kind of a loose tie-in thing. It's a little hat tip. Good example, Molly Ringwald in Not Another Teen Movie. That's like the ultimate hat tip, right? That's a hat tip. That is when you take a concept or a real basic thing and you give it a nod. You say, I acknowledge that, I am borrowing from you. Theft is where you take 99% of another game's concept, turn it into your own game, and totally not reference the other title whatsoever. Let me give you an example of this, which is a brand new, this is what kind of prompted this brand new game. And forgive me for touching on the modern gaming topic, but I have to because it all works out to relate back to classic gaming. Mortal Kombat Deception just shipped for Xbox and PlayStation 2. Now, for those of you who have not yet seen it, I'm going to tell you right now, if you are an old-time Mortal Kombat fan that totally lost faith in the genre during the middle years, you need to give this game a look, because to me it feels like they kind of went back to the roots and they kind of brought back some of the feeling of the original Mortal Kombat games. However, in the same breath, I'm going to tell you that they committed theft. This is blatant theft, folks. This is not hat tipping. For those of you who may have seen the Mortal Kombat Deception commercials and said, damn, that looks like Super Puzzle Fighter too, because they have this little puzzle game in there where you play these big-headed fighting characters. Boy, does this ever sound familiar or what? Where you drop down boxes and you can explode same colored boxes with colored emblems that fall down with the pieces. Boy, it sure sounds like Super Puzzle Fighter, doesn't it? And if you play it, you'll go, holy crap, it's exactly like Super Puzzle Fighter. Not just a hat tip, not just we're going to throw in the big-headed guys. That's a hat tip. Right? The big-headed guys are just totally Super Puzzle Fighter, and that's a hat tip. The fact that they basically stole 90% of the mechanics of the game or more, that's theft. Okay? That's saying somebody somewhere is going to say, when they see Super Puzzle Fighter, or maybe they won't, they'll believe that Mortal Kombat Deception, that Midway came up with the concept of Super Puzzle Fighter. Does it bother anybody else when you hear a song on the radio and it's a cover of some, or a remake of some like 1980s tune, and the kid next to you truly believes that, I'm going to have to pull a name out of my butt here, Limp Bizkit came up with this song, right? They invented it. Like Whitney Houston owning I Will Always Love You, right? These kids, this generation has no concept of history because it's being stolen. History is about understanding the past as to not make the same mistakes in the future, right? Without a past, you have no future. Well, instead of having an identity, instead of having a historical look, they're just taking from the old days. It's not like borrowing a simple concept. Yes, there were many games made that were similar to Pac-Man, right? Or similar to Space Invaders. You can go through the argument and say, nothing's original anymore. Right? If you look at Grand Theft Auto 3, probably one of the highest rated games ever, biggest selling games ever, and I'll admit it's one of the best games ever. Is there anything new in Grand Theft Auto 3? Not really. But they took hat tips, they made references, they took little tiny pieces from other products and created something new out of it. What Mortal Kombat Deception did is nothing short of theft. They stole fizzy lifting drinks. And they stole Super Puzzle Fighter. They rebranded it. I mean, they didn't even have the audacity to not make the players have big heads. That's no longer a hat tip. Now, what's no longer a hat tip also in this game is the Archon ripoff. Yeah, you probably looked at that. It's called Mortal Chess or Combat Chess, I think. And, folks, it is Archon. Not Archon in the sense that Star Wars Battle Chess, right, was Archon. That, there's been a ton of different games where you go, oh, well, that's Archon, right? What was the other one that just came out? oh man, it just came out like last year, and I'm totally clueless at what it was. But they put this game out. It was a LucasArts game, and I'll be damned if I can remember the title of it. I'm sure I'll receive 100 emails now telling me what the title of it is. That game was more of a hat tip than theft to Archon. Let me tell you how much theft that Combat Chess and Mortal Kombat Deception is to Archon. It is so bad, they didn't even rename the spells. Yes, you have Teleport, you have Imprison. All of the spells that you saw in Archon are right there in Mortal Kombat Combat Chess. They have PowerPoints. I'm surprised they didn't even actually say PowerPoints are proof against magic. I mean, that's one of those phrases that you look back at and you can remember 30 years later. PowerPoints are proof against magic. Surprised they didn't steal that too. There's a complete difference to hat tipping versus theft. There is a difference between doing a remake and stealing a title and calling it your own. And to me, that's what we're starting to see more of. They've decided that name whoring isn't working out, even though we still have Prince of Persias and Spy Hunters and all these other ones, but they're starting to slow down a little bit. Used to be that every other title was a name whore title. But now, it seems that we're moving into a different thing, blatant theft of games. Now, granted, it's not the main title. I mean, when you play Mortal Kombat Deception, you probably aren't going to spend a lot of time in puzzle combat or chess combat. You're going to be spending a lot of time probably online, fighting other people, or you're going to be playing the arcade mode, right? Or even the conquest mode, right? There's a difference between borrowing a concept, between that doing a remake, name whoring, and this new blatant theft situation. Now, people probably say to me, well, Shane, I played VS Ball. That's not exactly a hat tip, but it is. There's no other game like VS Ball. Okay, a ball bounces around and breaks bricks. That's a concept. That's Arkanoid. All right? There's no other game where you have to match those squares and take them away. I have taken, a small percentage of another title and totally spun it a different way. That's a hat tip. VS Ball is a hat tip to Arkanoid. VS Ball is a hat tip to matching square games, right? VS Ball is a hat tip to a lot of different games. Now, Combat Chess is a theft of Archon. Now, if they would have wanted to impress me, they could have made something a little more, this is Archon to you. I don't know what they could have done. I'm sure I could think of something off the top of my head, but to me, there's a difference between hat tipping and theft. And I believe that the new threat to our classic gaming way of life is to simply not license the name, not even do remakes, but to just take it. Just take the game. I don't understand why Capcom isn't suing the living crap out of Midway. That is such blatant theft. Of course, Electronic Arts doesn't care about Archon. If they would have, they would have made a great version of it years ago. So they're going to get away with that. But I can't believe Capcom's letting them get away with that. I'm not sure how they do. But in any event, there's a real big difference, folks. There's a difference between giving props and just taking everything. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in times to come. So if you have examples of blatant theft versus hat tipping that you've seen in modern games, write in. Let us know what you think. I'd be curious because I know there's more of them. I mean, not just borrowing a concept, not just a four-directional maze eating dots games. I'm talking about basically taking the game out of its environment, reskinning it, and putting it inside your game. That's theft, folks. I don't know how else you can explain it. Maybe you have a different opinion. Sound off on our feedback page with the show. Be curious to hear what you have to say about hat tipping versus theft. Now, for this month's Bits and Bytes, we are truly jam-packed and loaded. Largely thankful to Dana Eiler for many, many links that he contributed this month. I've got so many, I just want to jump into it and start talking about it. Okay, let's start up with the Nintendo DS. Yes, they started revealing some of the lineup that will come out for the Nintendo DS. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with the Nintendo DS, this is Nintendo's next generation handheld, sort of the answer to the Sony PSP. dual screen, 3D graphics, touch screen, 8011 wireless connection, microphone, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on. Go look it up. There's about 25 games expected to be ready for the unit. 120 games are totally in development. They've got groups such as Activision, Electronic Arts, THQ, etc., etc. Just as an example, the DS version of the Madden game that's coming from Electronic Arts will show 22 players on the field on one screen, with the other screen showing key action. I imagine statistical picking and things like that. You'll be able to compete against each other using the built-in wireless capability. We're also going to see titles like Tiger Woods, The Herbs, Sims in the City. What else do we got here on the list? We're going to see a couple of the standards, Mario 64 DS. We're going to get another port of Mario Kart. Now, a lot of people are wondering, why am I excited about the Nintendo DS when it sounds like they're basically getting nothing more than a cavalcade of the standard games over and over again? Well, first of all, it's going to be backward compatible with the Game Boy Advance. For those of you who invested in flash linker cartridges, apparently they will work fine across the board, so you can continue your development. And there's so many things about the DS that make it exciting. First of all, it's got a new method of input, which is the touchscreen. I really think that touchscreen opens up a lot of doors, and a lot of the developers that I've spoken with think that the touchscreen will open a lot of doors. It's very exciting. It's basically getting a mouse on a handheld. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who's going to spend the time to do that? I think that it could be incredibly useful. Imagine being able to lay out plays in Madden or something with being able to actually draw where your players are going to go. I mean, that'd be just totally cool, right? Tons of different possibilities. There's also the fact that it's wireless networking. For me, I would love the concept. Now, I don't know if this is going to be possible yet. I haven't gotten enough detail. But I would love to be able to sit on my couch right now, connected to my wireless access point, playing my producer in a game of Mortal Kombat across wireless internet. To me, that would be like the total bomb. I would play peer-to-peer games on the Game Boy if it was wireless, if I could play with somebody that wasn't sitting right next to me, which is kind of funny because I'm the kind of guy that's usually the cheerleader for the traditional sit next to each other and play, which I still like. But in this case, you can go peer-to-peer across something that's already hot in your house. It is totally cool. I mean, the whole concept of that would be awesome. And I'm very excited about the emulation possibilities. I think there's going to be enough horsepower inside this guy that can give us sort of the Game Park 32 feel in terms of maybe getting Commodore 64 emulator, a fully functional Atari 2600, full-speed 2600 emulator. That's what I'm looking forward to. I don't care about Donkey Kong 64, DS, Uberlite, World Edition Criterion. I'm more concerned with getting a build of MAME that maybe I can run Zookeeper on the thing. You know what I'm saying? Along with that, the price point of $149 is definitely going to bury whatever else is coming out. The Sony PSP, they're talking like $399. Not going to happen. So that's kind of why I'm excited about the Nintendo DS, along with seeing some of the lineup. I mean, I might play a Sims game. I might play Spider-Man 2. I don't know. But I'm more interested in it from a development emulation point of view. Somebody wrote in, this is a Mac game. The game is called Airburst Extreme, and apparently it is a 3D version of Warlords, for lack of a better term for it. The screenshots look pretty good. If you're one of my 5 Mac listeners, oh, did I say that out loud? Yeah, I'm gonna have to have all the Mac people come in on Saturday. That would be super. No, sorry about that. Every now and then I just have to let that slide. I've probably got twice as many Mac as Linux users. But anyway, looking at the screenshots, of course, I'll post a link for you. It looks like a pretty decent game. I was never really drawn into Warlords myself, but pretty much everybody else on the planet was. So I would feel negligent in my duties if I did not pass that piece of information on to you. Let's see what's next on the agenda. There's just so much stuff. The Atari Flashback game console. Now, this is really old news by now. I mean, this is a couple months old. They're going to create a TV game version of the Atari console. I know that sounds kind of creepy, but how does this work out? Okay, it looks kind of like a 7800, and it's got those crappy 7800 paddles, the joysticks with it, which is really, really poor choice on their part. Isn't that right, Brian? But it looks more like a 7800 with maybe a little hybrid of that 2600 Junior thing, but there's no cartridge port. You plug it in like a regular old TV game, and you play it that way. Now, let's talk about what games are on there. These are 2600 style games, right? I'm trying to think if there's actually they actually show differences in versions of the games. Apparently not. But here are the games that it includes: Adventure, Air-Sea Battle, Asteroids, Battlezone, Breakout, Canyon Bomber, Centipede, Crystal Castles, Desert Falcon, Food Fight, Gravatar, Haunted House, Millipede, Planet Smashers, Saboteur, Skydivers, Solaris, Sprint Master, Warlords, and Yar's Revenge. Man, I can't get excited about this, guys. I just can't, aside from the fact that I don't think I can do another TV game thing, but, you know, they say that, like, Asteroids and Centipede and Breakout have never been released. Oh, no, I'm sorry. My bad. I was reading the wrong line. Saboteur had never been released, but basically everything else has been already released on one collection or another. I mean, there's a couple of decent titles in here. Adventure, of course, Battlezone, Asteroids, Yar's Revenge. So we got a couple of decent ones on here. But let's be honest, that's not like the mega cool pack, and they're talking about $145 for this thing. That might be a difficult bite to swallow. We'll see how that works out. That's going to be available for the holidays. Let's see what else we've got here. There's so much stuff to go through. Let's see. What's next? Yeah, here's a little interesting piece. It's a little message forum post about the concept of maybe MAME going away. MAME being the multiple arcade machine emulator that all of us have grown to know and love. It's interesting, the thread talks a little bit about the fact that the MAME website, the official MAME website, now houses Google ads along with another couple of panels of ads, and one of the Google ads actually shows, apparently, now I didn't see this actually for myself, but it talks about the fact that it was showing an ad for somebody selling ROM discs for $5. That's pretty disturbing. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that could actually possibly get them into trouble. Of course, Google would be held responsible for the ad and all that, but I think that's an interesting thing to see these. And what's really funny is I actually had to go to a different browser because I have Google ads and every other ad off MAME.net blocked. So I had to actually go to another browser so that I could see what they were talking about. And yeah, there's make a new home arcade system ad on here. Let me refresh this and see if I get something different. Xbox PS2 to PC converter, light gun ad. Of course, we have one of those too. We don't actually make anything off of that ad, though. That's about it. But anyway, so I thought that was kind of an interesting little piece. I'll post a link to that. You guys can tell me what you think. Oh, yeah, zany video game quotes. Remember the all your base or belong to us routine that went down, oh gosh, what was it, like 3 or 4 years ago? There were shirts, there were coffee mugs. I mean, somebody just went to town. I can't remember what game that originally came from. I think it was one of the original Chrono Trigger or something. Anyway, somebody decided to make a game site based on all of these really bad English carryovers, these bad translations. So you can go through here and see some of these really, really funny quotes. And I'll see if I actually had one in particular that I was going to bring up here for you, but it's being slow here. Anyway, I'll give you a link. You guys can go in there and look for yourself. Some of them aren't necessarily bad conversions. They're just funny. Let's see. What else have we got? Yeah, let's see. Oh, here's one. And it doesn't say what this is from. That was kind of sad of him. The immortal geese is about to show you to a very hot place indeed. I like that. That's good. See if I can get another one. You got the cane of Samaria. It will be very helpful if you make proper use of it. Right? It will be very helpful if you make proper use of it. What a mysterious cane. I love that. There's some classic stuff in here. I could sit and read this stuff all day. Let me see if I can find one more here. What are you calling undies, Toots? This is my format where, I'll have you know. Classics, a fighting game. Anyway, so zany video game quotes. Once again, we'll post a link. I think you'll find it entertaining, to say the very least. The Sega Mega Drive 6-in-1. Again, this is not a really new product, but this is one of those TV plug-in boxes, and my God, I never thought I'd see these things take off. This one contains Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Kid Chameleon, Flicky, Altered Beast, and Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Once again, we're in a situation where basically you got Sonic and Golden Axe. The rest, Altered Beast, come on. How long can you play Altered Beast for? But it comes in a nice, stylish-looking, original 3-button Sega controller. Again, plugs into the TV. You know the deal. You put batteries in it. It's standalone. I've not had an opportunity to see how good the Golden Axe is, which is, of course, the only reason that I'd be interested in it. It was Golden Axe. But we'll post a link. They got screenshots, etc., etc., etc. What's next? Oh, here's an interesting article. Are retro video games better or just old? All right. And this has a couple of quotes from some of the guys from like the Classic Gaming Expo. Some interesting stuff. A lot of sponsored links. I'd say half the page is full of links. Hopefully you have a good blocker on here. But it's an interesting article. We'll have a link there for you. And let's see, what's next? Sid Meier's Pirates. Now, this was another one of those games, Pirates, that I never quite understood the real big draw to it. You know, it was out on the 64. I believe there was an Amiga port. There was a PC port. Supposedly set the industry standard for innovative game design with open-ended role-playing and real-time adventures and action sequences. Well, you know, I couldn't get into it. I still can't. I went back and tried to play it again just in research for this show, and somebody's going to have to write in and explain it to me, because I even got the really nice enhanced CD32 version with the digital audio and all this good stuff. It still just doesn't give me an impact. Anyway, so we got an interview here with Sid Meier. I'm sure there are plenty of Sid Meier fans who are just going to go nuts and want to take a look at that. We will post a link. What else have we got here? Yeah, I'm sure Brian's going to cut a bunch of this and ahming here. Oh, here's another interesting article from the Edmonton Sun, posted on canoe.ca. Getting old sucks usually. This is another one of those interesting articles about growing old and video games, etc., etc. A lot of companies, this is a quote from the article, a lot of companies are now releasing these little plug-and-play game controller thingies with a bunch of old-school games built in, like a Namco unit that's arcade-perfect versions. Okay, so first of all, this guy's lost all credibility because they're not perfect. Miss Pac-Man, Xevious, Mappy, Pole Position, and Galaga, or a set of 2600 paddles that have, well, virtually every 2600 paddle game ever conceived. And then he puts, except Kaboom, damn it, I used to be a child prodigy, Zen master, indestructible warlord, Olympic champion Kaboom player. I still have those bomb-dropping patterns burned into my cerebrium. Yeah. That's so funny because that was one of the biggest bitches I had about the 2600. Anyway, so he goes on to say how they're still fun and, kids don't get it, stuff like that. But it's an interesting article. It's one of those ones where it's like, same thing we've been telling you, but it's nice to see it in print. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here's a good one. Sony paid $82 million, that's American dollars, folks, to Immersion for violating the San Jose company's patent on video game technology. Apparently, force feedback got him into trouble, and there's a whole article about this. I think that's kind of funny, because a lot of people do credit Sony for kind of inventing that force feedback thing. We've actually had discussions about it up on the previous Retro Gaming Radio forums. And so there's been this whole debate. Anyway, here's an interesting story about Sony having to pay out for it. So for those of you who thought Sony did not invent it, well, there you have it. Let's see. What's next on the agenda here? Man, I cannot get enough of this stuff. Atari's best-selling hunting franchise hits new targets with Deer Hunter 2005. Most realistic hunting experience to date with multiplayer gameplay, graphics, and environments. Okay, first of all, I'm going to go buy an island and go live on it. All right? We have come way too far in this whole thing. You can go out and hunt. You can drive tractors and farm the North 40 on your computer. There's no end to where this is going to go. This is the end of life as we know it. Okay? The Deer Hunter series is the #1 PC hunting brand, and Deer Hunter marks... Okay, wait a minute. #1 PC hunting brand. There's Deer Hunter and what? I don't think there's like Elk Hunter out there or is there a Big Game Hunter? I can honestly tell you that the only hunting game I know of is Deer Hunter, which is classic. This is like saying that Pac-Man's been around for 30 or 40 years. And Deer Hunter 2005 marks the most realistic hunting experience to date for the franchise. Really puts the player's skill to test with advanced animal AI, realistic animal behavior models, a new map editor, and the addition of a multiplayer experience. So now you can shoot the guy that wasn't dressed in Hunter Orange. So basically what we're going to turn this into is Deer Hunter Doom 2005. Interesting. I want to know, now see, the whole thing about simulations to me, and this is what they kind of talk about, realistic hunting experience. I think they actually use the word simulation in here. When you talk about a simulation or something, I would expect that, like Flight Simulator, right? Pilots have actually used Flight Simulator, and it actually has improved their ability to fly. That makes sense to me. I am not sure how a mouse and keyboard are going to increase your hunting prowess. I look at this and I think advanced animal AI. How smart's the deer to begin with? I've seen people who can't tie their shoes shoot deer. That can't be that hard. So what they're actually doing is not doing a simulation. They're turning this into Doom with deer. I think there's a mod for that somewhere. I don't know. Anyway, you can read all about it. These sort of things, just Deer Hunter 2005, this sort of stuff just cracks me up. I can't get enough of it. That American Farmer. Let's see here. I think that was another duplicate. Oh, this is another. Oh, here we go. The arcade. I'm sorry. Boy, it's just going to be a bad day, isn't it? Atari 2600 PC. The Atari 2600 PC is a fully featured PC designed into the case of a retro 2600 video game system. It serves as a DVD, CD media station and an all-purpose video game and computer emulator. Sounds interesting, huh? Anyway, basically this is one of those do-it-yourself sort of things. And they talk about the hardware that you can stuff into this thing. It's got some cool pictures. It's interesting to see people doing this. I would rather see them working on making a true Atari 2600 commercial handheld, instead of having to pay $700 to have somebody build one out of spare parts. But hey, this is cool too. We will have a link. What else do we have here? Oh, we have this flash animation, which I'm sure most of you have seen, called MAME Rock. It's made by Grandmaster Peter. Anyway, this is a flash movie. Features some classic video games from MAME. Definitely worth taking a look at. Some people have way too much time on their hands, but it's definitely worth taking a look at. It looks like it was done with Swish. Anyway, if you like those cute little flash movies based on video games, you'll definitely want to check it out. If nothing else, just to see the Pac-Man ghost play guitars. Okay, we'll have a link for that. Ah, yes, Codemasters. For anybody who's been around the block for a while, everyone knows who Codemasters are. They're one of the early 8-bit developers. They've been around like, 18, 20 years, something like that. And the very first game I think that they put out was like in 85, 86. Let's see what it says right in here. Yeah, BMX Simulator hit the top of the charts in 1986. And they're basically giving this away for you folks. So you can celebrate their 18th birthday by downloading some of their free stuff. Hey, it's worth checking out. If you are into Codemasters, which a lot of people were, and the BMX Simulator was actually pretty cool. So I can't smack them around for that. What else do we have here? More dead links. Well, it's better that you guys got them before I put them out. Another little nice retro article here. Pack is back from the Washington Times. We'll give you a link there. Another one of these standard talking about why video games are successful from the past. Blah blah blah. Nothing that you haven't read before, but I like to pass these sort of things on. Yeah, apparently there was a price leak in the very early days. I got like 3 or 4 of these, so I just combined them all into one, that were showing that Walmart was showing the price of the Nintendo DS long before apparently it was supposed to. It had a list price of $199.82, standard Walmart price, right? But this was, of course, before Nintendo released a price or a ship date or anything else. And I'm sure Walmart and Nintendo went at it over this one. But anyway, they had some pictures on some of these. I'll probably post one of them. It's not important since we all actually know that it's going to be $149.99, and you can actually pre-order it, and you'll be able to buy it next month. Excellent stuff here. What else do we got? Yes, quick transit. Now, this lines up with a lot of what I've already said in another show, so I'll keep this brief. As many of you know, many of you Xbox lovers who are using your game console as a media player, the big selling point of the Xbox, of course, for most people that I know, despite what people say, everybody I know that has an Xbox has it modded, and I know people that can't spell mod that have their Xbox modded. Apparently, Xbox 2 will not be a PC at all, but rather a dedicated piece of hardware like video game systems should be. Instead of taking off-the-shelf crap to build the next Xbox, they're actually going to use some custom hardware, which means it's not going to be so easy to turn your Xbox 2 into a PC. And if you could turn it into a PC, it's not going to run what you think it might run. My guess is it's going to be so non-PC that it's going to really hurt Microsoft. I'm looking forward to that. But this sort of backs up the fact that you're not going to be able to play first-generation Xbox games on Xbox 2, which is great because I think that would be a great knife slit in Microsoft's throat. And that alone gets me giddy as a schoolboy. So the Quick Transit emulator might allow Xbox 2 backward compatibility. And I'm going to read just a little bit about that. Let's see, where's the good thing in here? I don't know if there's another good one in here. Basically, it just says that it's going to be an Xbox emulator. Now, what will really be interesting is if this gets ported over to other items that use PowerPC, because that's what the Xbox 2 is supposed to have, right? The Mac PowerPC chip. It'd be interesting to see if Quick Transit releases an Xbox emulator, an Xbox One emulator for the Mac first. Now, that'd be just too funny, wouldn't it? If the Mac people got an Xbox emulator, an Xbox, which is basically PC hardware running on a special version of Windows, the Mac version, the Mac computing platform gets it first. That'd be funny. I don't know. Normally that sort of thing would piss me off, but I think that'd be funny. We're starting to run down here, folks. This is good. Oh, Tecmo Bowl joins TV games. Jack's Pacific is at it again. I got yet more and more. These guys are just going nuts, man. I've never seen a company exploit classic gaming as well as Jack's Pacific has done. There's a new Jack's TV Games product based on Tecmo Bowl and other Tecmo properties. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in here. Mighty Bomb Jack, Fire and Ice, Solomon's Key, and Tecmo Bowl, the most well-known retro football gaming title. This is going to be the same as everything else, folks. I'm sure it's going to be a crappy conversion stuck in a box that you're going to pay $29 for. You know, you'd think that as people collect these things, because you got to figure, how many of them are there now? What if you got one of everything, right? Remember we were bitching about how much space cartridges took up? We were complaining about how much room the CDs and the cases and stuff took up. That's why a lot of us got an emulation. So we could take all of our stuff and put it in a box somewhere sealed up where it didn't take up a bunch of room. Now you've got 50 of these PC games that have 4 games apiece on them. They're these big, awkward boxes that you got to plug into your TV, plug and unplug. I don't know. It seems to kind of defeat the point. I sure would like to see them work into a portable, all-in-one TV game that actually used cartridges. I would simply think that would do so much better. But I'm sure it's coming. They'll milk this property as far as they can, and then they'll move forward with raping the console community. Let's see. Oh, the Book of Daniel Video Games Rant. Hey, this is a pretty good article. You guys would have a good time with this. This is basically the guy talking about things that he hates about the video game industry. I'm going to give you kind of a list of these. The top 3 here: bad controls, and he specifically cites Resident Evil, classic. Buggy games, and he spells games G-A-Y-M-E-S. I love it. Licensed movie games rushed out the door so they can be on store shelves the same time or before the movie hits. He bitches about that. Good stuff. Remember Me. This is a personal for me, and it's aimed straight at Nintendo. Remember the NES? The Super Nintendo? I sure do, quite fondly, I might add. These 2 consoles had tons of classic games. I don't even need to list any. Everybody knows them. Even the ones made by third-party products were great. Sure, there were some bad games, and every system has them, but they were far outshined by the greats. So what happened? Nintendo grew too big for their britches. They became arrogant. They felt censoring the blood in Mortal Kombat was a great idea. That was the main point of the game. They pissed off the third-party developers. Anyway, they go on and on about Nintendo and all this other good stuff. So, anyways, it's an interesting read. I like seeing other people's opinions on this stuff. It's always entertaining, especially when they just, happen to slide into line with mine. There's a couple of games he lists specifically as being the top of the line. And I'll give you a list of these. Yar's Revenge. Okay, I can go with that. Final Fantasy Tactics. Never even played that. Super Metroid, right? Everyone pretty much agrees on that one. The Dot Hack series on PS2. Haven't even seen that. I own a PS2 and I don't have that. Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, Super Nintendo. So, anyway, it's an interesting article. Feel free to kick in and check that out. Oh, yeah, and I don't know if this stuff's still going on, but anybody who was in the old Amiga business, whether you were retailers or just fans, remember Software Hut. Software Hut was pretty much the last of the big Amiga supporters. Anyway, they're closing out all of their stuff in this Amiga grab bag bundle. And again, this is kind of an old article here. It's well over a month old. They may not even have this stuff, but let me read this to you because this is interesting stuff. We are cleaning out our warehouse and wanted to offer our customers first shot at fabulous offers. The first offer is a software blowout. While supplies last, we are offering 25 pieces of boxed new Amiga games on disc for the price of $29.95. We call it a classic grab bag. These are all titles that were originally released for $29 up to $59.99 when they were first released. All games are unique, meaning you get 25 different titles per grab bag. Don't miss this chance to add to your collection top name Amiga games. Note we have so many titles we cannot quote what titles are in each shipment, but all are new and in original packaging. Nice, huh? That's less than $1 a hit. You might get some interesting stuff. They also have some other stuff on sale. If you're looking for, say, a trackball or an Amiga 500 motherboard with chips, a 4000 power supply, an Amiga 500 power supply, some of these other interesting things, they've got access to that. So, very cool. Very cool. It's nice to see that there's still interest cloaking around for the Amiga. It's good stuff. Here's another one of those milk you dry month-to-month subscription things. I got this little article about on-demand video game services. Now, this is funny, because I feel like I'm a pretty in-tune guy, and I have never even heard of this yet. Apparently, Comcast, IGN, and Yahoo are all in the video game on-demand business. You can download basically games to your PC. They don't have any console games, but you can download these guys, play them, and you pay month to month to keep playing them. DRM on games, it's finally coming. Or it's been around apparently for a long time. Several years, the article says. But the library is very dated. And Yahoo seems to have some of the newer things like Prince of Persia, Sands of Time, and Splinter Cell. $14.95 a month that lets you rent unlimited number of games. Comcast's on-demand site apparently is just like it. But you have to have, of course, a special application to serve as a portal to browse and play the games, which is a pretty standard deal, right? They don't want you actually getting to keep a hold of these games, which is really funny. You know, you'd think that I could see paying a rental for the biggest and the best, but I have trouble believing that people would actually pay to rent 3-4-year-old video games. It just doesn't seem like the market would support that. But what do I know? We'll post a link. You can read about it. For those of you who aren't satisfied until you get Doom 3 on your handheld, there's a new Punk game engine from Extreme AI, which is basically the Torque game engine scaled down to fit your hand. The Punk mobile game engine. Basically, it's your standard Me Too game maker that runs on your handhelds, including PSP, DS, Zodiac, Tapwave, and other OpenGL-enabled devices. So if you're big into the concept of being able to play whatever the hell you're playing at home already on the PC or on the Xbox, then you're going to want to check out this article. Me personally, I think 3D should be stopped at the door for handhelds, but again, what do I know? Once again, I submit to you that video games are for playing. Unless it's an interactive movie, I do not want 7-minute introductions on my video games. I have an article here featured from G4 Tech TV, and I'm going to completely say this wrong. Onimusha 3. You know what? I speak English, okay? Anyway, the article's titled Art as a Game. And this game has a 6.5-minute intro. I'm at lack of words here. And they're basically saying in this article that there's absolutely nothing in feature film or any CG game or cinema that compares to the skill of this opening movie. I haven't seen the movie, folks. Chances are likely I'll never see the movie. However, this is the sort of thing that this doesn't bode well. Those of you who are interested in actually playing video games and not watching them, these are the same people, mind you, that turn around and slam Dragon's Lair and Night Trap for being interactive movies, whereas this thing don't even bother making it interactive. We'll just have a 7-minute movie at the beginning of it. I have still yet to understand how you need that much story to play a game. Again, it goes back to me feeling like it's work. You know, I'm in the middle of Champions of Norath. I've been playing that for probably 25 hours. I still don't know the damn story to that game. I go from mission to mission, I do what they tell me to do, and I'm done. You know, I don't know. Anyway, it's a game review for the title, and I'm not sure exactly what the contributor wanted me to say about it, but I don't know. When a game is basically ran on the fact that it had a 6-minute intro, yeah. Anyway, we'll let you guys have at that on your own with a link. Here's an interesting little piece for those of you who are interested in following publishers. Gaming's Top Publishers, the name of the article, was on IGN.com. And I think it's kind of funny. They're talking about how they rate developers by Game Developer Magazine, how they rate the publishers. It's kind of interesting. They ranked them by original intellectual properties and developers' opinion of the publishing practices. It's so funny. I like and this is funny because I could picture this one. By contrast, Microsoft, a company many decry as only nurturing its own products, scores high not only for original IPs, about 56% of the past year's titles, but also for its reliance on external developers, about 78%. The report also finds that Microsoft has an excellent reputation with its developers, especially when it comes to the company's producers and its reliability with commitments. How does that read to you? I'd be curious to understand what exactly that means. I think the excellent reputation of its developers are probably because the developers are scared to say anything bad about them, but that's just my opinion. Every time I talk to a developer with regards to Microsoft and Xbox, I get the same deer in headlights stare and almost like a canned recording spewing out of their mouth, especially if you're talking about something that's not out yet. But hey, what do I know? I don't work with Microsoft. I'm not an Xbox developer. But anyway, it's an interesting article for those who are curious about how that stuff pans out. Let's see here. What else we got? Another article on the true testament of the return of classic video gaming, more along the lines of a fad, of course, than anything else, anything that's enduring. Nintendo nostalgia pushes buttons of Lawrence gamers. Very funny. It was a kind of a viewpoint from a store that sells classic stuff. And the guy says, I used to joke that I could pave 7th Street with all the Nintendo decks that I had. Now I only get a couple in a month. Interesting stuff if you're interested in seeing how, from a sales point of view, how these things move. I thought it was an interesting article. Fear and Respect, a new Midway game apparently that John Singleton is developing as a video game. Paramount Pictures is making a movie out of it. Of course, I don't know anything about this particular title, but apparently it's one of these phone ringings. That's what it is. You know what, B, we ain't even going to talk about that. I can't even find myself even close to getting excited about that. Okay, and the last article for Bits and Bytes this month, not that we don't have tons more, but this is the last we're going to do for this month. Collector's Corner, Classic Atari. This is sort of an interesting little article on how to collect and some of the, where to buy stuff, how to buy stuff, what costs a lot, what doesn't cost a lot. It's sort of an interesting article, especially if you're kind of new to the video game collection thing. So definitely check that out. We will post a link for you. I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this edition of Bits and Bytes. We have gone on forever already. I mean, gosh, we're closing in on 40 minutes of Bits and Bytes alone. And we got tons more stuff to cover. But we're going to cover that next month, which is just around the corner. And that's going to just about do it for Bits and Bytes. This month we're going to sit down with Carrie from Messiah. Now, Messiah are making these cool little Super Nintendo-looking RF remote game controllers for you to play and do all your good gaming on. We sat down with Carrie at the Classic Gaming Expo 2004, and here's the interview. This is Shane R. Monroe with Retro Gaming Radio. We're here with Carrie Straley. Carrie Straley, I'm terrible with names, from Messiah Entertainment, and she's going to talk a little bit about their product. What's the exact official name of that?
NES wireless controller,
Okay,
2.4 gigahertz.
And this is an RF controller. It's not IR.
Mm-hmm.
These are wireless controllers for the real systems, for a real Nintendo, real Super Nintendo.
Yep, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about the product.
It's really exciting. We did a lot of cool stuff. Each controller has the original look of the old NES and SNES controllers, but we put a lot of new stuff in it. We have touch-sensitive select and start, slow and turbo, and the action buttons are very fast. We used arcade technology, so they're very, very fast to the touch, and also the D-pad is a 360 rotational, so it's really easy to do very difficult moves.
How does that affect, like, four-way games like Pac-Man or anything like that? Is it still pretty responsive? Don't have that pushing to the corners or diagonal problems?
We haven't had any problems yet, but the D-pad's a little bit sensitive right now, but in September it should be all ready to go.
And bring up September, that's when you guys are looking to ship final product.
Yeah, mid-September. Yeah.
Right now you've just got some demo products out on the floor, get some exposure to the company.
Yep, just a prototype so people can see exactly what we're doing.
And what are some of the other selling features of it? I know that being RF, you're going to have non-line of sight problems kind of go away.
Yeah, we haven't had any problems with interference, and we have a 30 feet range guaranteed, but we've used it very far away, over 100 feet, and no problems. So that's really great. And also 40 hours of playtime. So you don't have the problem with changing the batteries all the time, or dying batteries and losing your game.
Sure.
So that's really great.
Each one now, what's the power configuration? 2 batteries per controller, AA's, AA's?
Yep, AA's, 2 AA's, and batteries are included. So when you get the product, you can play right away, which is nice.
Now I know you're running some sort of a promotion thing, a limited edition sort of thing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we have a limited edition, which is really cool. We have hand-drawn artwork on the front of each of the packaging, and it's packaged in a tin lunchbox, which is really cool, and it comes with 2 wireless controllers in each package, and is running for $49.99. And we are only manufacturing 5,000, and they're all numbered, so the sooner you purchase it, the lower the number, which is pretty exciting.
And if they wanted to pre-order, how do they do it? They're not here at the show, obviously. How do they get in on that?
Pre-order sales we are accepting now online at our website, www.playmessiah.com.
Playmessiah.com.
We take credit card and PayPal, and you can do that whenever you want.
And you guys are shipping mid-September, is that right?
Yeah, mid-September.
And what about for those of us who have like home PCs, or we use Genesis or some of the other types of products? What are you guys' plans for anything like that?
We are looking into doing a wireless Genesis controller, and also an Atari and NES Advantage as of now. But if there's something you want to see, please contact us. We'll definitely look into it.
Do you have like a little poll or a survey sort of thing on the site where they can go and kind of like, choose what they'd like to see next or anything like that?
Not really. You can just go to contact us at playmessiah.com and give us an email, and we will talk with you personally.
Outstanding. And how's the response been so far at the show?
Really exciting.
Really?
Really exciting. Everyone seems very excited about the product and very positive. We're very happy with the feedback.
That's great. And you're a new company.
Yeah.
Just getting started up, and that's great. That's great. Anything else you'd like to mention about the controller that I might have left out or missed? You want to plug on that or anything?
I think that's about everything.
Okay. Well, we are talking with Carrie from Messiah Entertainment, plugging their new wireless RF controllers for the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, available at playmessiah.com. Thanks so much, Carrie, for dropping in and telling us all about your new product.
Great. Thank you so much.
We'd like to thank Carrie from Messiah for stopping by and talking to us about their new product. Look for more cool products in the near future, right here on Retro Gaming Radio. This month we sit down with Andre Lamont, the CEO and chief scientist at Nerve Networks, LLC. These are the guys behind the XGAMESTATION. Now, this is a pretty cool little piece of hardware, folks. This is dedicated homebrew building of classic gaming hardware. They supply you with the hardware to build your own classic games. That sounds pretty weird, but listen to what Andre has to say in the interview. This is Shane Armandro at the Classic Gaming Expo 2004. I'm here with Andre Lamont of the XGAMESTATION. We have seen this product before. We weren't exactly sure what it was used for, how it was used, but our listeners are interested in it. Give us a little background about yourself and your company.
Okay, the company is Nerve Networks LLC, and we incorporated the company to kind of develop embedded systems for hobbyists and students. The conception of the XGAMESTATION was to provide a solution for students and hobbyists that wanted to learn hardware design, and particularly hardware design of video game consoles. So right now there are a lot of books and media and internet content on how to make games, but not necessarily how to actually design the hardware itself. And so that's what I wanted to do, was make a kit that would come complete with a system that you could learn the design on, an ebook, and everything you need so you could learn to make a console, a video game console.
And so this is really pretty much a hobbyist tool. This isn't something that you would build a console and actually market. Would you offer something like this?
You could. You could. So the point is, you're going to learn the skill set and the tools necessary to design a video game console. So this is like the hello world of video game console design. So maybe after you learned it, then you could move on to a more advanced console and make an embedded system like, say, a JAX, a handheld controller, whatever.
Interesting. And so what does this consist of? What do the people get, and how much does that cost?
Right. You get the XGAMESTATION pre-assembled. It's a single PCB board, suspended, kind of open so you can get to it. It also comes with an integrated development environment. You program an assembly language that we've developed. Comes with all the cables you need to download the software to it. Comes with the ebook that I wrote about the architecture and the problem solving, the design of the XGAMESTATION and how it works. Comes with an Atari compatible joystick, power supplies, and all the cables you need. So it comes with everything that you need.
Is there demo code, lots of demos that they can work with?
Right, lots of demo code, lots of tutorials. I show step-by-step from basically basic electronics and current and voltage all the way up to computer architecture. So they learn everything. And then we have a number of demos. How do you run a keyboard? How do you do video? How do you do audio? So step-by-step a person learns, and so they get all that stuff.
So is this designed for somebody with a more technical background, or could pretty much anybody pick this up and start from nothing, and as long as they kind of have a general idea what's going on? Or?
I think that, well, right now we have a few systems with even teenagers that have no background whatsoever other than a little bit of programming. So it's definitely for the technically minded, but if you know how to program and know nothing about hardware, then you're going to be fine. If you don't know how to program, I'm not going to teach you to program in this book. It's going to teach you how to design the hardware. So you have to have some programming skills.
What exactly, what does the board come with? CPU, memory, that sort of thing, for more technically oriented listeners?
Sure. I decided to use the Ubicom SX52 processor, and that processor, I'm running it at 80 megahertz, so it performs about 80 MIPS processing power. The processor has a 4K of onboard ROM memory, flash memory. That's where you put your program. Okay. It has 262 bytes of high-speed memory internally. So it's a very lean processor. Now, externally, I have an extra 128K by 8 SRAM. So you can talk to that, create a frame buffer with that. You can decompress things into it. The video is done by pure software. So you control the raster yourself, except there's some external hardware to help with the color. So you can generate the color signal easily for NTSC or PAL. Input-output is done through 2 Atari joystick ports, so it's Atari 2600 compatible. They're easy joysticks to make, and you can get a hold of them, so that's easy. It has a PS2 port, so you can connect a keyboard or mouse. And sound is done with a ROM chip from a cell phone. So and that was easy to find, because if you try and get old sound chips like a SID chip or an AY8910 or 12, you can't find them anymore. So I had to find something that was easily available. It does 3-channel sound with envelope control. And then it has an expansion card slot so that people can make their own cards. That exports most of the buses, the power supplies, and the clocks, the system clocks. So it's really a nice platform to experiment, play with, and it uses a lot of dip sockets. So if you burn a chip out, you can pop it out. You can put a probe on it without worrying about, destroying a pin, because it's very robust and it's open space, so you can play with it.
Cool. So does the package that come with you mentioned experimentation, right? And a lot of times you learn by experimentation. So does the ebook take you through, pull this chip off and see what happens, or change this out and see what happens?
Right. So in a good example in the ebook, there's a demo that puts up color bars on the screen. So then what I say is, now what I want you to do is pull out the color burst oscillator, and when you do that, everything will still work, except you won't have any color, you'll just have shades, and so forth. And then there's another experiment where if you have an oscilloscope, it'll say to probe a certain pin, and you can actually see the nice NTSC signal, and you can see that it looks like the picture that you would see in a textbook. So there's various experiments that kind of take you through things, so you can kind of put theory with practice with something visual.
Interesting. And it's interesting that you chose gaming over, say, something else to focus a hardware tutorial on. Where did that come from?
Well, from my background myself, I've been doing games since I was about 10, and I've written game development books for about a decade. So I like gaming and simulation and graphics. But more importantly, game machines and video hardware and software are probably the most cutting edge. So every electrical engineer, every computer programmer usually starts their career with an interest in how do you make a video game. And if you ask people, it actually is almost unilateral. So by showing that kind of hardware, that kind of covers everything: audio, video, I/O, memory, high-speed buses. And so it's a nice place to show all those different things and integrate them together for a real application, video games.
It seems like a real niche product. Have you had a lot of response on it? A lot of sales?
Yeah. People are really interested in it. It's a niche product, but it's targeted towards hobbyists and people who are interested in making this kind of hardware. So you're not going to sell as many units, obviously, as a consumer product like a JAX controller, but anybody who's going to school and learning microcontrollers or embedded systems, or just software guys that want to learn how the hardware works.
Do you work with any universities or schools and get these guys in on the ground floor with those guys and get them started right?
Right. There are a number of universities in the United States right now that are going to be using the XGAMESTATION in their 2005 curriculum.
Outstanding.
So instead of using, they usually have these old embedded controllers, SDK kits with like little hex keypads and a couple little digit display. And the teachers call me and they say the kids aren't engaged, they're bored. And so the XGAMESTATION will be kind of a fun thing to come to the class and say, today we're going to generate video on the screen, tomorrow we're going to do audio, etc. So yeah, a lot of schools are interested in it.
And what are some of the applications, games, that people have developed with it that are of note to you?
Well, everything. I gave demo coders around the world in a few different countries prototype units, and within a couple weeks they made 60 frame a second raycasters. They've made music systems that play MIDI or a form of MIDI. Created Pac-Man games in 4095 bytes, Tetris in 4096 bytes, floorcasters, all kinds of 3D demos. So some pretty amazing graphic demos. And also a couple other people are working on basics that run inside of the main core and then run code out of the SRAM. So, and it's taught them very optimal programming. So already they're thinking in different ways.
That's good. Okay, so let's say that people are interested in getting in on this. Where do they find out more? How do they buy it? How much does it cost?
All right, so we're doing all the sales now online. Okay. So if you go to our website, which is www.xgamestation.com, xgamestation.com, normal spelling, the system is $199, and you get the XGAMESTATION assembled, the power supply, cable, the IDE, all the tutorials, and the ebook that I wrote, along with other ebooks and white papers all in electronic form about the processor and various programming of that. So you get everything that you need and all the tutorials to start as a starting point to hack on.
Outstanding. It sounds like a very interesting project.
Yeah, thank you.
Very interesting. I got to see it. I got to take a look at it. You've got to give you a visual idea, and I think we have some pictures. You got 9 1702 monitors up there running everything from Pac-Man to color band demos and all sorts of good stuff. How's the response been here at Classic Gaming Expo?
It's been very good. Everyone's really excited about it, and even if it's something that they wouldn't personally be interested in, they think it's a cool idea because they've never seen anything like it. And like me, when I was 10, that's what I wanted, how to build my own video game system.
That's tremendous. Anything else you want to fill in on that maybe we didn't cover?
About the only thing is that we'll be releasing the system right now, and in the future we'll develop more systems. But we're trying to create a community so that people can develop interesting applications for it and so forth. And I think that the community and all the software is completely open source, so people can have everything and do everything. We're just selling just the hardware. So I think that's going to be kind of the interesting thing to see what people do with this.
That's outstanding. Well, thanks, Andre. This is from Andre from XGAMESTATION.com with his video game hardware creation package. Build your own little arcade console. And he gives you all the tools to do it. Thank you so much, Andre. It was very interesting.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Cool.
We appreciate Andre sitting down with us at the Classic Gaming Expo 2004. Look for more cool, innovative, and unique hardware right here on Retro Gaming Radio. Shane R. Monroe at the Classic Gaming Expo 2003 here with Retro Gaming Radio, and Don Daglow that is here with us today. Don, thank you so much for stopping in with us. We appreciate it a lot. Don, you just got done doing a keynote speech, and I don't think we've ever actually talked about a keynote speech from the point of view of the keynote speaker. What was that like for you? Was that enjoyable for you to do?
It was a lot of fun because I actually had a chance to be part of 2 sessions in a row. First, the Intellivision Programmer Reunion that we have here at CGE every year, and then for the first time I did a session about gaming before Pong. back when the university students were programming on mainframes, mostly for each other and certainly not for money.
Absolutely. Now, just so that my listeners have a good background on your claims to fame, what you've done, give us just a brief history of your claims to fame.
Well, I don't know if I'd call it that, but I started out writing games as a college student in 1971 on mainframes. We were doing it just to impress each other and have fun doing it because we were gamers. So I wrote, it turns out, the first baseball game, one of the first Star Trek games. I wrote the first role-playing game, it turns out. And then from there, when the industry started, I got to work at the very beginning of Intellivision as one of the original 5 members of the Intellivision in-house programming team. And from there, again, I was very fortunate, went to work at Electronic Arts, early in their history. And for the last 15 years, I've actually run my own company, Stormfront Studios.
Excellent summation. It sounds like you've done that before. We've not had a lot of Intellivision.
Your Freudian slip is showing.
Yeah, pull that up. Yeah, it's been a long weekend. We have not had a lot of Intellivision folks on, so we're probably going to talk about that. Tell us what it was like starting Intellivision. Obviously, you had a lot of work in front of you, being as though there was already an empire that was Atari. What is it like going against odds like that? Give us some early Intellivision anecdotes.
It's funny, we were too naive to realize that was what we were doing. Because
that's probably better.
If you understand that Mattel, as a toy company, expected toys to have 2 or 3 year life cycles. So we were basically a short-term adjunct to the toy company's grand plan. It was only when the money started getting really big that they ever looked at us in anything else.
I see. So
we felt like a garage shop from day one. Our first offices, we'd move every 2 months as the team grew. But we were basically, if you picture a big warehouse, and then you put up particle board walls or like paper mache walls practically, and create these new little offices in the former warehouse, that's where we worked. And every so often they'd move us because we need more space, but we were still in this warehouse, and literally you'd walk out the door into the big main corridor, and you'd be dodging these big forklifts that'd be running by honking their horns.
So, who developed the hardware? Where did that come from?
Hardware was originally envisioned, actually, it's a combination of a scientist named Dave Chandler, who worked for Mattel at that time, and an outside engineering shop called APH in Pasadena. And that was where the original vision came from. Mattel originally looked at it as a toy. Once it started to sell, then they started to build up the staff behind it. And so that's when they started to realize, hey, we've got the best hardware out there right now. This could be big money. And then so we went from nothing into, within about 2 years, having $600 million worth of software sold in a single year for Intellivision.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Early days at Intellivision, I'm sure, are very similar to early days at all of the Ataris and everything else. Lots of long hours, lots of fun, maybe a little too much fun. We've got no one to tell us any stories about how much fun they were having in those early days. They just say no comment.
Oh, we want to hear about smoking the reefer.
Smoking the reefer.
Did you guys pass the reefer around at Intellivision? We know it was being passed at Atari.
We know it was being passed at Atari.
Actually, the only time I ever saw that happen was actually off campus. On campus, it was a very strict environment. There were security guards, and as I recall, they had sidearms.
Wow!
At the entrances, and you had to have the right kind of badge. Your ID was checked. Wow. Even though I ended up being director of game design and as an executive, I had all these other sorts of places I was supposed to go, things to do. My briefcase was searched every day as I left the building.
Wow! So you didn't get to take stuff home and work at home, so to speak.
If you were going to do anything at home, you had to have a property pass pre-signed by a vice president.
Wow.
For certain types of things. And that was left over from toy days. Because
right.
the toys, industrial espionage in the toy business is rampant. And they have to have these security points.
Right.
So when we started as part of a toy company, we were subject to the same security.
Gotcha.
And so that's where those provisions came from.
First programming projects that came out. I mean, the very first things you guys worked on. Tell me about that.
I was originally hired to work on the Intellivision keyboard component, which actually never shipped.
I was so praying that you had something to do with that, because I have a lot of questions. You guys had to be smoking the reefer when you were thinking about that one.
Who came? We're still trying to figure out the concept of putting a keyboard on a video game. How that could ever? I mean, I know hindsight's 20/20, but even thinking back there, it's like, how could that be a good idea?
I'll tell you a story though. I later found some of my compatriots at Atari, whom I talked to a few years later, and they said that their greatest terror in terms of business
Was that keyboard?
was that we would get the keyboard right. Because if you flash forward about 3 years, what killed the first era of video games? Oversupply of games, because there were a zillion bad games out there.
Right.
And the companies crashed and burned. And the fact that the Commodore 64 came along and it had both games and it was a real computer. And suddenly all those sales were going to Commodore.
Yeah.
So Atari, it turns out, was afraid we'd get the keyboard right, and of course, unfortunately, we never got the keyboard right.
Nobody got the keyboard right.
I have one
And people kept trying, though.
I have one little quick interjection. What is this chip you guys have on your shoulders about Atari?
Well, they're competition, but other than that.
I know they're but it's like the Linux versus Microsoft thing, where you guys are like Linux, whereas Atari was like, Intellivision, and it was more or less, they were more scared of ColecoVision than you guys. You guys were always like, yeah, right. But you guys were like,
enjoy it while it lasts or something.
You guys were like, I'm pretty sure if an Atari employee drove by the street, you'd have rifles and blast them off. And I mean, you can still feel it when you go over to the booth. Because like for last year, we were trying to get an Intellivision person to come over to interview, and we got blown off. And it was more or less like that kind of like, I'm not going to let you sucker me into an interview and ask me stupid Atari questions, or you know.
It was sort of that feel. I see where he's going with that.
And
I'll tell you though, it's funny though. At the time, when we first started out, it was, okay, they're building their games, we're building ours.
Right.
But then as you go on and you start to see how the market's shaking out, you realize, hey, wait a second, they're kicking our butts on arcade games because they have that speed of licenses.
Yeah.
We're a better game, we're a better machine, but we can't make headway because we cost more. We have the better sports games. And so, in the same way, so I think some of it was that we started to say, you know, hey, we've got a better game, so it was this sense of real competition. I think some of it, too, was the attitude of the old Mattel versus Hasbro.
Right.
Where you had that, and then it came down to Mattel versus Atari. And it really was a two-way street at the time, and now we can laugh about it.
You can, but I'm telling you, those guys in that booth over there, it's not a joke. They still think it's 1982.
I don't know. Put a couple of drinks in them and see how they really feel. But the fact is, at the time, we were really in competition there, and it was frustrating because we cost more. That the superiority of the machine, we still couldn't beat their installed base, and we were very jealous of their supply of arcade games. And I told the story in the Intellivision panel. We talked to Gottlieb, probably '82, where we were desperately trying to get arcade console games into Intellivision to compete. And this is about the time we got Burger Time from Data East. And so I went back to Chicago, and I was the lucky guy who got to go and do the evaluation. And first of all, I had this great lunch where I'm sitting down with Mr. Gottlieb and Mr. Williams, as in the guys these companies are named after.
Right. Wow.
Founders of Bally, founders of
pinball guys, yeah.
Tremendous industry figures who I just had so much respect for. I got to spend the day with these guys, and they showed us a couple of games they were working on. There was a package deal that we would take a package of games. And unfortunately, the games they showed us are not games you would see here at the show. They weren't good.
Right.
And they did not survive the test of time. So I went back to my bosses and said, you know, they're okay, but nothing great there. It turns out the package, which I guess Parker Brothers ended up taking, included Qbert. But Qbert wasn't shown that day. It wasn't developed yet.
Right.
And so once Qbert came out, and I found out later it was from the same package of Gottlieb, I was just going, why didn't you show me that, guys?
Yeah,
and
really?
Those are very frustrating moments.
It seems like there was a lot of frustrating times, other than just being the new upstart, so to speak. What licenses did you guys get? I mean, you guys couldn't even get the Dungeons and Dragons license. I knew it was something that could really have, I think personally, could have changed things around. And I'd love to know the story behind that too. But the general, I mean, was licensing on a very expensive level at that point in time?
For games of those days, it was expensive. Compared to now, it was nothing compared to today's video game industry. But if you look back at it, it started with the sports games, where they'd have the NFL license or the Major League Baseball license and so on. And then from there, it spread, and they started thinking, as the industry matured a little, and we weren't just doing the first of everything. Because first you're doing bowling, you're doing golf, and all you're doing is filling it out. Then there starts to be competition. Then licenses start to matter. Then we started trying to do more innovative kinds of games. That's when the Dungeons and Dragons license. It was great that marketing went and got that for us, because some of us were big-time D&D players. And even though in 4K or 8K of a cartridge, a lot of limitations, but still,
I thought it was still a cool game.
So thank you.
The Tron license worked out really well for you guys too.
Pardon me?
The Tron license.
The Tron license. It was interesting because the frustrating thing about Tron, we went up to Disney. I was in that meeting as well. We went up to Disney, and they're selling us, and so the half of the group was marketers, and then there was some product development people in sales and so on. And so they bring us into this big room, and it was very high tech for the day. So they had about 9 slide projectors hooked up in a bank of slide projectors, each of which would fill 1/9 the projector screen. So you figure this is probably, again, 1982.
Wow.
So we're not computer controlled yet, but they had some kind of a paper tape system that would program these slide projectors.
Wow.
And they had coordinated music that would play in the background.
And
so they played this music in the background, and these slide projectors showed different scenes from Tron. And this is early in production. And so sometimes you have 9 different images, sometimes you have one big combined image, whatever. And of course they're all superimposed just right. And so we see the scene with the solar sailor sailing across the sky. And we see the motorcycle race and turning the corners. And we see the CG, because that stuff was done early. And then we see, if you watch the film, there's one particularly colorized section where Jeff Bridges, his face is in a normal color, and there's color shooting all over his costume.
Right.
And we saw that, and this was the prototype of how what the film was going to look like. Well, I don't know the exact story, but when the film actually comes out, all the CG that was in the film was what we saw that day on the 9 slide projectors.
Right.
And there was a motion, there was 16 millimeters thing with it. Everything there was already shot, and the faces that kind of in black and white are not colorized the way that one scene is with Jeff Bridges.
Right.
And I don't know if they ran out of time or what the story is, but the original vision was for so much more color in that film. And so the film didn't turn out the way everybody had expected. And so we were working at that time on 3 different Tron games, which we eventually did ship, trying to go with that. But it ended up being one of those things that what you pictured when we started out and what we ended up with in the film were 2 different things.
Very different.
Was the Tron arcade game out by when you guys were getting pitched to?
I think it shipped about the same time that we did. Discs of Tron came later.
Right.
We did Tron Deadly Discs, and then Discs of Tron came out on Coin-Op. But the Coin-Op game, in fact, I think we were about 2/3 of the way through because we got one actually in the office, and we were playing the Tron Coin-Op game as we were finishing some of the Tron and television games.
That's cool.
Why didn't you guys convert the Tron? Since that was a different license, you guys couldn't translate the arcade game?
Whatever way the business deal got done by the business guys, that wasn't what we acquired. We acquired the right to do original games. And, why that worked out that way, I'm not sure.
Do you have any idea, and this question just popped into my head, and I don't know if you know the answer, maybe that's part of that. There's never been a home version of the Tron arcade game. Never. I mean, there's been Light Cycle knockoffs, there's been all that. There's never been a Tron home game. Any idea why?
I really don't. Normally when it doesn't happen, if you go and dig down on it, you'll find that there are different kinds of rights issues where, with a lot of these things, you have 20 different people own parts of the rights.
Right.
You can get 19 to agree, and you can't get the 20th.
Gotcha.
And then, and that's the explanation behind a lot of these stories.
Give us the rundown. Obviously, you were involved in a lot of projects in television since you were there at the beginning. We know that you were involved with Utopia. I mean, that's your baby. First sim game. Give us kind of a rundown of the titles you worked on that the listeners might recognize, and then tell us about Utopia.
Well, one of the things is I came in, did Utopia. I also did some early work on Tron Solar Sailor, but really Keith Robinson is the guy who really did that game because I got kicked upstairs into management. And I said, I could keep programming my game. I could keep working on it. They said, no, you don't understand. The good news is we want you to be a manager. The bad news is we really do want you to stop programming. So
that's too bad.
If you'd seen my code, you'd understand why. So after that, I worked on designing Television World Series Baseball with Eddie Dombrauer. And so Eddie and I did that game together. And I was involved in other games, but one of the problems with game design is if you write a 1 or 2 page spec for what a game is going to be,
right,
and somebody else then goes and codes that game, by the time it's done, it's really their game, not yours, because so many things,
Nuances
over the course
have
of
been
6
changed,
months
sure.
of working on it, you get so many new ideas,
Right.
so much that's original that's theirs. So really, those are the games that are really associated with me, are Utopia and World Series Baseball. The other games I was involved in, I really give the credit to the people who actually created them rather than myself for writing the original stuff.
Sure. So tell us about Utopia.
Utopia, it's funny because I was a writing major in college, and when we were writing these games, we didn't think we were going to make our living at it.
Right.
And if you want to be a writer, you always have a day job.
Right, yeah.
You wait tables, do whatever. I was a teacher. And so one of the things, as I kept writing games, one of the things I thought about is, well, how can I do this and bring this into the classroom with my kids and make it interesting for my kids? And I was teaching in an area where it was a very tough neighborhood, and the kids, you were looking for all the ways you could to get the kids interested in school. So I started writing, I actually wrote a Dungeons and Dragons game for the classroom where, based upon your knowledge of things we were working on in class, we'd help open the story.
Gotcha.
And so we'd discuss things during the day, they'd put in their answers, I'd write it down, I'd go run on the computer at night, bring it back the next day. If they got it right, then they'd be it was a way of making the material interesting.
I bet that worked out very well.
The kids liked it. It was my last year as a teacher before I went to Intellivision, and so I didn't have a chance to really hone it, but I was starting to go somewhere with it. So when I had the chance to do an Intellivision cartridge, I started thinking, okay, well, what kind of thing could I do like that? And we had other people doing action games. John Soule was working with Astro Smash. Mike Minkoff was doing bowling. And so I thought, what would be kind of different? I'm trying to do something that would be variety to this. And of course, I look back now, and no marketer in his right mind is going to let me build Utopia on the Intellivision. But I put forward the idea, and they said, this is different, it will broaden the line. Gabriel Baum, who was the VP for the group, went and fought for it and said, hey, diversity, variety of things for the market. And marketing signed off, and they let me build this game. And so what happened was we thought, okay, nice line filler, whatever, is what they were thinking. And that was, this is courageous on the part of marketing. With 20 years of hindsight, a lot of times people from that era in marketing get criticized. The courage it took to approve Utopia was very real. It was not your normal game, being the first sim game. And so we get to CES. This would have been, it was shown its complete form in January CES of '82. And the next morning after the show opens, my wife opens the paper back home in Los Angeles, and the screen of Utopia is on the front page of the entertainment section of the Los Angeles Times, and they're saying this is a harbinger of future games to come. We weren't thinking this. I mean, I was trying to do a different kind of game to provide variety in the line.
Right.
And suddenly we got all this notoriety, and the game sold. It was not one of our biggest hits, but it was a hit. And the marketers who signed it off looked like geniuses, and they deserve that credit for the courage they showed.
For taking the chance, but...
Because I was spouting off. I mean, I wasn't the one who had to sign off on it.
Right.
I didn't become director of the team until later. So I didn't have to take the responsibility for the sign-off at that point. These other guys are the ones who deserve the credit for the courage to do it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And tell us a little bit about the game Utopia. A lot of people are Intellivision ignorant. I will admit, Intellivision is not my strongest suit. But give a little idea. What makes it the first sim game?
Well, the idea is, because at that point you had only one static screen, it's only a 4K cartridge.
Right.
Which is where the mainframe programming from the early 70s comes in handy, getting by with a little. Each player has an island. It's a two-player game. And what you're trying to do is much like the sim games of today, if you play Civilization or Age of Empires, you're trying to place things on the island that will benefit your people. So you can put down farms to grow food, you can put down schools to educate them. And you actually had a score that was based on how happy your people were. And then weather would come across, and the rain might rain on your farms and grow more food, or a hurricane could come spinning across the screen and destroy parts of your island. And if things go really badly, rebels will spring up and start destroying things themselves. And of course, if you wanted to play that way, you could put rebels on the other guy's island too.
So it was not just a sim game, it was also sort of a precursor to many of the sort of like real-time strategy competitive type games as well.
It was competitive. Obviously, there was no military component, although your ships could go and harm. If a fishing ship came next to one of your forts, you could destroy it. But again, we're dealing with a case where if everything you draw on the screen can be about 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch in size. We had some restrictions here, but in that respect, you had a little military, but most of it was sim. And I got kidded a lot because at the end of every turn, you could pick how many turns and how long each turn was, and you get a score. And we had the algorithm for calculating how happy were your people. And the other programmers of the team would give me a hard time because it was about 3 pages of code to go in and look at all these factors and calculate how happy your people were and give you a score.
Right.
And they would say, that's the longest string of code ever written for Intellivision that never actually printed anything, made a noise, or drew a picture.
Interesting.
In the entire history of the Intellivision was my 3-page scorekeeping algorithm. If you actually ever play Utopia and watch the Intellivision, it actually chugs for a second. It hesitates, even though it's a powerful processor for the time. The only time you'll ever see the Intellivision chug is you will watch it chug, waiting for a half a second while it calculates how happy your people are.
Were you by any chance involved with Populous at Electronic Arts? Because the games, Populous sounds like it owes a lot of its origins to Utopia.
I would like to think that maybe we played a role inspiring that, but no, by coincidence, I wasn't working on that game. The games I'm best known for Electronic Arts are Adventure Construction Set, Earl Weaver Baseball, Mail Order Monsters, World Tour Golf, Lords of Conquest. I'm leaving out some hits. Racing Destruction Set.
Oh, man.
Now, the funny thing is...
We must bow. We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Oh, man.
Racing Destruction Set is programmed by Rick Koenig with art from Connie Goldman, music from Dave Warhol, all of whom were part of my Intellivision crew.
Oh.
And
Interesting.
If you go back and look, Dave Warhol actually did a variety of things at that time for EA. Also, Rick Koenig, for example, did motocross. And Eddie Dombrauer, who did Earl Weaver Baseball with me, also did Intellivision World Series Baseball with me.
Interesting.
When I recruited him at Intellivision, because Eddie had designed, before he came to Intellivision, the first dance notation system. He was a professional dancer in addition to being a programmer. And he had designed the first system that would let you record on an animated figure a dance. So you could write it down in a code and the animated figure on the computer would dance it. And I was looking to do big figures, and I wanted to do TV coverage camera angles, which had never been done on a game before, for Intellivision World Series Baseball. And when Eddie came up and had this background, I thought, this is the guy who can do it. He will know how to do it. He's going to bring a tremendous amount to the game. And that began a collaboration where we worked together over on a series of games over a 5-year period. And a lot of what made both Intellivision World Series Baseball and Earl Weaver Baseball great games, Eddie Dombrauer deserves the credit for that.
Amazing. You definitely had your hand in some of my personal favorites.
Nice too.
Did you have any do any work on Legacy of the Ancients?
No, that game was I did not have a chance to touch that.
I think that was a third party that EA ended up licensing to publish, so it's probably Adventure Construction Set.
Before you get I just want to comment on a couple of the games that you said you worked on. Earl Weaver Baseball is like the last bug-free baseball game I've ever played on the PC. Also, is that technically the precursor to Triple Play?
I don't think really, because actually what happens is when you do these games over a period of years, and you do version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, 2 things happen. Number one, the code, as you update it, every so often you have to get a fresh start, because if you get to where you're putting patches on patches, and you just need to go back and really rewrite and then do your next update from scratch. Also, sometimes you need a break. I took a 2-year break on baseball between, I took a 1-year gap between Intellivision Baseball and Earl Weaver at EA. I took a 2-year gap after Earl Weaver Baseball before I did Tony La Russa Baseball, because you just need to recharge your batteries. And so after we did Weaver, there was a gap, and the guys who came in and did Triple Play really did start from scratch. If we influenced them in a positive way, I would like to think that. In fact, some of the guys who worked on Triple Play are very dear friends of mine. But a lot of us have all worked together, and most of the major games in baseball that are done today normally have some crossover tie in the human beings in them back to either Earl Weaver or La Russa, one of these games, just because those teams tended to stay in baseball.
Right. How do you feel about the... Because Earl Weaver was like the first game I ever saw with expansion discs.
Yeah, I was going to get to that.
And apparently, that just seemed like a fluke because once LaRussa came out and then onto Triple Play, that whole concept disappeared. How do you feel about the way the market has turned as far as the gall? To me, it's like the gall and the nerve to sit there and charge $50 every year for the exact same product, when back in the day, you just buy a $10, $15 expansion that you buy.
Obviously, it's great for the business. Obviously, great for the business, but obviously the consumers don't care. They keep buying it. But, I mean, do you have an opinion on that one way or another?
It's a good news, bad news. The way it went has basically been based on relationships in business and all how that went. But what was good for the consumer is it used to be that you would buy a baseball game and you would get some classic players and you get a certain amount of stadiums and so on, what we could fit on one disc.
Right.
And part of it was a space issue. And then for the hardcore who wanted more, you could buy the expansion disc for the Major League players for that year. You could buy an expansion disc for more stadiums.
Right.
And again, what would fit on a disc. And some of this was business related and some of it was space. The good news as we went towards the modern era is we entered a point where for the consumer, all those things, especially once we got to CD, but even once we got to smaller floppy disks,
right,
we got to where all that was packed in with the product and you got it all at once. The bad news, so you actually got a better value.
Right.
The bad news is that as the updates, we often used to do updates every 2 years, maybe even every 3. Once the market pressures meant that you started doing updates every year, the difference between last year's version and this year's version got smaller, even though the publisher may have spent literally millions of dollars on those upgrades. Because some of those upgrades are cash intensive, even though they may not look like a huge difference. For example, if you look at, say, a Madden football, which is a game where some people will say, hey, it doesn't change that much year to year. Other people look at it and say, hey, there's a lot of changes. Electronic Arts has a big team of immensely talented people down in Florida that work every year spending millions and millions just to try to pack everything they can in during a year to create that difference. And sometimes it's whether the glass is half full or it's the glass is half empty.
It's a very optimistic way of looking at it. So you officially, you work as part of EA themselves during what I would call, and this is no offense because I know you don't directly work for them, but they are your publisher, so we have chips on our shoulder about EA, but that we'll get into that. You work directly for EA during that time frame, during the awesome era where you basically I look at any game that you can open up from that time era where you could open it up and there was stuff inside and you could see the developers on it, the Archons, the Racing Destruction set. Those are the golden eras, and that's the time you worked there directly. And what you were a project manager at that time?
My job actually was as producer, and back then the job of producer was a little different. Actually, Trip Hawkins, the founder of EA, invented the idea of having producers work in the games business. Nobody had been called a producer, at least that I know of, inside the games business before that happened. Certainly at Mattel, we never had that job title. And what he did is he brought in people from A&M Records to teach us how to be producers based on the record industry model, so that we would understand how to do that and try and learn and get a head start on how this new entertainment form would advance. So our idea at that point, at Mattel, I started out as a programmer and game designer. Then as a manager, I was trying to manage and supervise and build a great team, and have my team build great games. Being a producer was much like that, because our job was to find the talent, find the products that would be the best people and the best games for that time, and then bring them into Electronic Arts, sign them, and then manage the developments of the games.
Was Electronic Arts during that time frame, as we talk to Atari people, as we talk to now yourself from a television, things were often very loose. In other words, developers worked on what they wanted to work on. They weren't handed project tasks, but they invented and they designed and they engineered. Was it still that way at that point in time at EA, or was it the project was handed down?
Well, I'll tell you, at Intellivision, we had a little bit, when you were free, sometimes people were simply assigned something, especially as you get towards the latter part of that first era. Or you would have a chance to work on an idea for a few weeks and see if it would fly. And after a few weeks, then you'd have to get more approvals.
Right.
And basically, as director, I had what would amount to a war chest I could have a few experiments going at any time.
Right.
At its peak, I had about 50 people on my team for Intellivision. Mike Minkoff had about 50 people working for him on non-Intellivision projects. We each had a couple of things going that were nominally in the other guy's bailiwick. So Mike had some Intellivision things, I had some other things. So we'd have the mainstream stuff we were doing, then some experiments. And after a while, we'd even have to show our experiments, and we'd have to go get approval for that. So there was kind of a check and balance system. At Intellivision, the producers had a chance to go out, find things we believed in, bring them back to the company, and then try and talk the company into doing them. And so we could get a little money for something to start it out,
right,
and try and win that approval. And ironically, still, although that was a very different era to Electronic Arts, some of the people whose approval we sought then, in the early days, are the same people who, in fact, are still executives at EA now. They've actually stayed there for 20 years. So some of the people we pitched to then, internally, we still pitch to remotely, externally today.
So you left Electronic Arts, and when did you leave Electronic Arts to start with?
I left EA after about 3.5 years, so in '87. Spent a stint for about a year and a half at Broderbund, where I was kind of full of myself and thought I was going to be able to lead a big publishing team, and I learned how much I didn't know and gained some perspective off of that.
Interesting.
Learned a lot about publishing there in a very different environment. Just the difference between inside EA and that culture and going out to another culture. And then after that, I founded Stormfront in 1988 as an independent developer.
And give us a history of Stormfront, basically, titles.
We've actually gone through different eras, because early on for Stormfront, we actually started our life as Beyond Software and then realized we could never trademark the name.
Beyond Software. Castle Wolfenstein?
Nope. Actually, that tells you how many Beyond Softwares there were.
Okay.
The only game we put out, in fact, as Beyond Software, was the first play-by-email game ever done that was fully automated, called Quantum Space, which we did for AOL. And that came out in '89. And then we changed our name to Stormfront, just as Tony La Russa Baseball and Gateway to the Savage Frontier were about to ship. And Gateway was part of the Gold Box.
Right. I love Gold Box games.
Love
Gold Box games.
So that went to #1 in the country in the summer of '91.
Go figure.
So in our early era, we were known for that, basically for online games, for role-playing, and for baseball. We did the original Neverwinter Nights for AOL, that started in '89 and actually went live in the spring of '91, which is the first graphical, massively multiplayer role-playing game. Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah.
Then we went through an era where we started doing more of the EA sports games. And so instead of people thinking of us for role-playing, they would go, oh, they just know sports. That's all they know how to do.
Right.
Then we did NASCAR. We started what is now the NASCAR Thunder franchise for EA Sports. And we did the original version of that. And people started saying, oh, all these guys know how to do is racing games and car games.
Nice.
And then now, once we started doing action-adventure games, of course, with Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, for PS2 and Xbox last year, based on the movie from Peter Jackson. Now people think of us primarily as action-adventures. So depending on when in our history you look at Stormfront, you think of us for different kinds of games.
Did you guys do the GBA conversion?
No, we did not do the GBA version. In fact, the GBA version was an original work done completely outside of Stormfront.
That's too bad, because I love the GBA version. Yeah. I don't have a next-gen console.
And their team deserves full credit for it, because it was an original piece of work that they did.
Well, okay, let's be honest. I wouldn't say that it was an original piece of work, because it's Diablo Light. I mean, they even stole the model for the health and mana, but that doesn't mean it's not a great game, and we play the crap out of it. But obviously, you're doing very well with Electronic Arts. We're curious. I know you're just itching to kick in over there. We have an issue with the concept of Me Too games, and it seems that there's a lot of them. EA seems to have a good portion of those. From your point of view, from your standpoint, doesn't it bother you putting out what the consumer, at least a lot of us, consider to be the same game every year?
You know, I think one of the battles you face is that there's two things going on. And again, there's a trade-off here. One thing you could argue for is that I think for hardcore consumers, you can make a case that actually buying every other year and getting the chance to get 2 years worth of features in that, I think for certain kinds of hardcore gamers that may be the right trade-off. There are a lot of players who get their first console every year. And what a lot of the big companies are doing, if you look at the arms race that goes on in the sports games between Sony, Sega, and EA, for example, where they're each, every year, trying out to put out the best football game, the best basketball game, and so on. Each of them are challenging each other. The new consumer really benefits from that because that arms race produces the multi-million-dollar budgets those teams get every year. The downside is if you are a dedicated player who has been playing one of these franchises for years, the core mechanic may not change that much year to year, and you may feel like it's harder to spend $50 every year for that game. And yet the teams are spending millions to create that change. So it's a tough trade-off, and I don't think there is a right answer.
Let me ask you this. If you had a choice, now let's say, we can even cut this off the record later if you want. If you had a choice whether to do absolute original games every single year, let's say EA would walk up and say, $50 million, write whatever you want. Mm-hmm. Would you write another baseball game every year?
For many years I would have, and then I need to a point where I needed a couple of years off, and then I would come back to the point where I would. When I was in the middle of it, to give you the perspective I had in the middle of the year-to-year baseball wars, I wanted passionately at that time, and we're not doing baseball right now, I want to do it again at some point, I wanted passionately to build the best baseball game in the world that year. I recognized intellectually that there would be players who might look at that game, compare it to what we did a year ago and say, hey, I'm going to wait a year to buy it.
Right.
Because, not enough changes, I'll wait a year and I'll get Don's next thing a year down the road. But what was boiling inside me was that desire to do that, because for two reasons. Number one, it's what I did. Bees buzz. You build the games you love. And secondly, if I took a year off, all those competitors were not taking a year off.
Right.
And they would kick my butt because they would bring out a game that clearly was better than my game last year. And at that point, I might not get the chance to build another baseball game because once I'm that far behind, nobody will give me the money to go and compete. So I think that looking at it from the consumer point of view, I think there's a very justifiable frustration for somebody who is the long-term hardcore gamer. As the passionate game designer in the thick of the fight, I can't let that discourage me from trying to build the world's greatest game.
Let me ask you this. Baseball is a finite subject. There is only so far you can go before you have basically the World Series playing in front of you on the screen. How long is that going to take? I mean, let's be honest. We have known about baseball since, let's say, the beginning of time, right? We know everything about baseball. How do you make a better game out of something that has a finite set of parameters?
What's definitely happening is we're getting to the point of diminishing returns. And I think even the most passionate of the designers would tell you that. Over the years, we got to where we would get finer and finer improvements each year, and they would be more subtle as the consumer observed them.
Right.
And then what happens is you get a new generation of hardware, and suddenly, oh boy, now we can do a big dramatic change again.
But what change? I mean, other than graphics, other than sound, stuff that has to eventually technologically peak. Mm-hmm. How do you make it better?
When we were doing year-to-year sports games, which we're not doing right now, in a year where you were, say, in the third or fourth year of an existing platform, you don't have a lot of hardware change, two things happened every year for us, and I'll use baseball as the example. Number one is we were able to make everything a little bit faster every year, so we could get some, even though nominally there was no improvement in the graphics, the machine was still the same, we could get some improvement in the graphics every year. We get a little smarter about how to do things, so we could get some improvements in the audio. We would have a feature list of things we wanted to do the prior year and ran out of time to do. We'd get those in. But remember, those features those are the ones that used to be 101st on the list, and the first 100 features are in, so now you're down to number 101. So it's a real hardcore consumer who's now looking for that feature. And then the final thing, in baseball we always did, and this is a prejudice of mine that does not appeal to every consumer. I wanted the game to be more statistically accurate and a more accurate simulation every year.
I knew you were going to say that. I was just waiting for you to say that.
And I recognize, very frankly, somewhere between 20 and 33% of the audience really cares. Right. And somewhere between 67 and 80% are going, oh, that's nice, thanks for doing that, but now I'm going to focus on the other things. We still did it because it's the way we're made, But we recognized we were not doing that for everybody.
Shane, let me say something.
Go ahead.
Shane is not a sports guy. He doesn't really like sports, but I'm a baseball, football.
Star League Baseball. That was the end of my baseball days.
And you know what? Star League Baseball. Here's a great
I'm
story.
sorry.
Star League Baseball, if you go back and look back at Star League, you talk about Scott Orr.
Yes. Scott Orr put out a lot of good stuff.
Scott Orr put a lot of good stuff. Well, there were prior versions of Madden Football, and some good people worked on them. Madden Football went big when Scott Orr and Rich Hilleman at EA, and Scott started out outside of EA, and Rich was inside, and then Scott went inside. When they did the redesign of John Madden Football, I believe it's for the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, I should say, yeah.
That's when Madden went big.
Right.
So the same Scott Orr, who does not get enough credit in the industry, and the same is true for Hillman, that Hillman does not get a lot of credit he deserves, with the passage of time. But Scott Orr from Star League Baseball and teamed up with Hillman on Madden Football. There's a direct line, just like a lot of these places in the industry, different hits and different eras. There are secret lines or little-known lines where the same people were involved. Scott Orr is in both those places, and I agree. Star League Baseball was a major game in the development of baseball games.
I hope it sold well. I don't know how well it sold. I mean, I wasn't thinking about sales back then. I was thinking about playing games.
In its era, there was a time when it was the best-selling baseball game. At one point in the early 80s.
I mean, I tell you. Anyway, go ahead, Brian. I didn't mean to.
That's fine.
I don't play games.
That's for me. I'm a hardcore sports. Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
Okay.
I'm done with it.
I forgot what I was going to say. How come they just... I understand how come... But why don't you guys just release expansion discs? I mean, especially in the realm of CDs, how come they don't just do expansion CDs that add on to the existing
Could it
year?
be made cost effective for you to put out an expansion team and a couple of fixes quarterly?
Basically patch the CD.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm a developer now, not a publisher, I didn't know how the rules work. But basically the way the economics are set up of how the whole retail system works, retail does, if you go into your store today, if you go back to the early 80s and you go into a game store and you picture how many games used to be hanging from the pegs on the walls, there would be hundreds of games. And even in the toy stores of the early 80s, when we had Intellivision and Atari, in that toy store there'd be thousands of items and a couple hundred games. If you walk into Best Buy or Warehouse or a big game store today, there aren't that many games on the shelf. And that's because that's how many slots the retail channel will justify giving to games. And the border where the music CDs stop and where the movie DVDs stop and where the games begin, that's not by choice of the games industry or the music industry or anything else. That's from the retailers. There's a certain number of slots. And so one reason you don't get expansion discs, and I'm sure there are others that are things I don't understand, but I imagine that one of the reasons you don't get more expansion discs is that simply the retailers want $50 items in that limited number of slots. And so if you do expansion discs, they're a lower cost. And even if it made economic sense for the publishers, and I don't know if it would or not, just at retail, if you can sell something that's $20 or you can sell something that's $50,
so it's the retailer's fault. So it's the retailer's fault.
I think there's probably a lot of things going on that all add up, but I think if you look at the way the retailers need to run their business, and the retailers, the publishers, everybody else, I'm fortunate. I'm involved with a smaller private company. These guys, every 3 months, every number gets looked at by Wall Street, and their stock price swings wildly up and down. So these guys operate under tremendous economic pressure as they're trying to run their businesses.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, before we let you go, would you like to talk about anything that's currently on the market your company has done? Would you like to give some plugs here out? Please.
Well, of course, our timing is always like this. We're about 10 days away from our next big announcement of what our next game will be, so we'll be able to talk about that shortly. But certainly we're looking forward. The problem we have right now is that having done Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers on PS2, and having had that game go so well, and sometimes you pour your heart and soul into a game and it doesn't go well. Right. Other times you do and you really hit it. That one we felt lucky we hit it. Now we have this very high expectation for what we do next. So it's a lot of pressure, and the team is working very, very hard and we'll see if we can meet those
Is
expectations.
this a licensed title? Can you tell us that?
Can't comment on it for about 10 more days, and after that, then we'll be able to
dang
go
it.
on at length.
Could you email us and tell us so we can at least
talk about it on
Yeah,
the show?
touch base with me then, and we'll pass it along.
Okay, because we'll try to run this around November, so like Christmas
So
season.
you'll be able to get some little info for the Christmas.
Yeah, it's a 2004 title, so.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Then maybe
Oh,
we'll
good.
run a little later. Okay.
Super.
Don Daglow, thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in. This is really very informative. It is very nice to have somebody who's worked both in the past and the present. We don't get a lot of folks that can give us the alternative side to developers, and it was very useful to us. Thank you.
I hope it's a balanced point of view because these are tough questions, and some really good people suffer and struggle with them, and you get those guys off talking about it, and they're talking about the balance they're trying to strike, and you can hear them kind of going, "There's no right answer here. I'm trying to do the best I can."
Right.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
This month we're going to introduce a new little segment. It was sort of a segment we tested ages ago. People seem to like it, so we're going to give you the new Pinball Parlor segment, where Bryan and or myself will be taking a look at various pinball machines, some new, some old, talking about them and discussing our feelings about it, because we're both pretty big pinball enthusiasts. And I know a lot of you out there are as well. So this month we take a look at Stern's Lord of the Rings.
Okay, now we're doing Lord of the Blings.
Lord of the Bling Bling. Yes, we've been hassled on various chat organizations to cover the Lord of the Rings pinball machine. And so Bryan made it a point that we spend some time looking at Lord of the Rings pinball and giving you our overall opinions of it. Once again, we trapped down to Castles and Coasters, which is the local hangout for any sort of decent selection of pinball. And they do seem to be varying in state of repair these days, where they seem to have taken a little less liberty in keeping their pinball machines up and running. Lord of the Rings was one of them that actually seemed to be in fairly decent shape, probably because it's brand new. Probably hasn't had time to get the crap beat out of it like the other pins. Lord of the Rings is what I would definitely call the over-themed pinball. Just lots and lots of themed elements. Now, I will tell you right now, I'm not a fan of Lord of the Rings. I'm not a fan of any part of the trilogy. I'm not a fan of the books. I'm not a fan of the culture. So keep that in mind when you hear my particular overview of the pinball machine. Now, I'm going to try to be as fair as possible, being a pinball lover, to give you the straight scoop. There were things I liked about the pinball machine. There were things I didn't like. Bryan, what do you have for an intro on this one?
I come on. You guys know I don't like Lord of the Rings. You just look at me and tell. But when I was basically harassed into giving Lord of the Rings a fair chance by a couple of people on the IRC who hopefully are listening to this segment, since I promised them one of the main things I do when I come down here is plunk some money in the Lord of the Rings and give it a fair chance, because I've played it 2 or 3 times before and just walked away scratching my head going, what was the point of playing the machine? I mean, it's not. Here's the problem with Lord of the Rings. It's not a bad machine. It's bad meaning badly put together, the rule sets and the missions. That's not the problem. The problem is that it feels like a fanboy pinball machine, meaning that if you're a really big fan of Lord of the Rings, you're gonna like the pinball. You're gonna love the pinball machine. If you hate pinball, you're gonna like Lord of the Rings, because it's just the characters are all there and doing their thing.
It's
and
loud. It's flashy.
Yeah.
It's got a little plastic characterage of everybody all around the machine. There's lots of runes written all over the machine. It's definitely, like you said, it's kind of fanboy related. It's almost like we had to take every possible element of the shows that we could and shovel them into the pinball.
Right.
That was one of my problems with it. And my major problem with the pin, and we'll look at some of the good stuff. We'll look at some of the good stuff too. But my major problem with the pin was that the missions were not very clear. In other words, you had to have somebody watching the dot matrix telling you what to do while you're playing this thing, instead of having
sound
or other cues that would lead you to what you were supposed to do. And I think maybe the playfield was a bit overly complex, meaning that it was a lot harder for them to show you what to do. There's a jump hole at the top that you fire through to trigger ring type missions. There was a
a Walk of the Dead that has little tiny bumpers that move the ball around and hit hot spots that trigger
Path of the Dead.
Path of the Dead. What did I
Sorry.
say? Walk of the Dead.
Walk of the Dead.
Yeah, whatever.
You've been calling it everything since we played this.
Something
machine.
of the Dead.
Something. Of
I
the
got Dead right.
Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead. Island of the Dead.
Island of the Dead.
Yeah, House of the Dead. You know, all that good stuff. Now, anyway, so they had some interesting playfield variations, but I think that the novelty of that wasn't enough to counter the problem with keeping the missions directives clear. Like in Terminator 3, we talk about that on another show. We review Terminator 3, whether or not you'll have already heard it or we'll do it in the future. Terminator 3 had very good visual and audio cues. They would tell you, shoot this ramp, shoot that ramp, shoot up this. You know, there's more. It was a lot more laid out. It's not something where you feel you'd have to put $100 in it before you have a decent idea of the rule set. Now, some people like overcomplication, and I think there's a good balance between complexity of missions and rule set and just well-designed, well-thought-out boards. And I think that's part of what my problem was with it, is just the board itself did not seem very well laid out and well-designed. There's a lot of white space in the machine too, a lot of real estate that was empty. They seem to have shoved everything along the sides and along the top, which leaves a really big open playfield area to put lots more lights and things that didn't make a lot of difference to me playing it.
The machine had reminded me a lot of Addams Family and Attack from Mars, which I can understand why certain people who really, really love this machine, they will stay nameless. They know who they are. Tell me that I need to give Lord of the Rings a chance. The thing with Addams Family is that you didn't even have to ever see the movie to love the game, because there's just so much. There's things to do on the Addams Family pin that are just, but they're like, you're not trying to figure out, well, what am I supposed to hit? What am I supposed to do? Where is this? Where is that? Whereas Lord of the Rings, you're just constantly looking on the playfield, going, okay, where is what they're telling me to do? I can't read half the writing. What is it? You know. And the thing with why it reminds me of Attack from Mars, it actually has the like on Attack from Mars, it has that one shot that you shoot that starts the mystery bonus that picks a mystery bonus, and that comes. It's like right after the bumpers. If you play Attack from Mars, it's like right after the bumpers, the ball can drop in from the behind or from the front. Well, Lord of the Rings has something similar, but I think you only can hit it from the front, and it actually does the exact same thing that Attack from Mars does. Attack from Mars has a spaceship. Lord of the Rings has that big, what is it called?
It's like a big ring.
No, not the ring. That's the chair from the Addams Family.
Oh.
I'm talking about the guy who turns around.
Oh, Balgar. The big monster-looking thing.
That you have to hit like 18 million times in order to kill him. And I guess he comes out only during multi-ball?
No, there's actually something you can hit. I think he's a captive ball hitter. You hit the captive ball and it puts him out.
Okay. The rails that come to the side, from the left and the right side, that you shoot up into, those are exactly like Attack from Mars. And I think the openness of the playfield reminds me of Attack from Mars too. The funny thing is, I love Attack from Mars. I mean, it's one of my all-time favorite games. Even though, honestly, I wouldn't own one because I could see me beating it about a year into it and just never playing it again. And maybe that's the whole problem with Lord of the Rings. It just doesn't have the repetitive play. You can just see yourself figuring the machine out and then going, okay, now what? But like I said before, I find myself playing this and I don't care. I don't care about what I need to achieve. It's not that I don't know what to do. It's like I don't care, because it doesn't seem like this. I guess to me it feels like there's not enough to do, but the things they have you do are so damn hard to do, it irritates you.
Yeah, it seems it's almost like it's over complex. It's like they said, we're going to confuse them for so long that by the time they figure it out, they'll be done playing it and we can move on to our next pin. It's like when they overcomplicate the rule set of a board game or a video game. They overcomplicate it so much that you spend more time trying to figure out what to do than to actually do anything. So you're not getting a chance to appreciate the atmosphere. You're not getting a chance to feel cohesion between missions. You're too damn busy trying to figure out what the hell am I shooting at? What the hell is the combo they want? And that's what really frustrates me. And this seemed to be one of those pins where it's like Simpsons already did it. Simpsons did it. It's everything had already been done. They just sort of like borrowed from Attack from Mars. They borrowed from Addams Family. And yeah, while there's always derivative work on, pinball's pinball. There's only so many different combinations of this stuff you can do. But the game itself felt like they decided on all the theme elements first, then built the table around the theme elements, and then at the end decided what the missions were going to be. And it just seemed like it just wasn't put together well in that respect. The other thing that I really didn't like about it, which I could see being an owner nightmare, because when I look at pinball machines, I'm not looking at it strictly from a player point of view. I look at it from an owner point of view. Would this be a pinball I would want to own? And what does that mean? Well, would it be easy to maintain? Would I have to worry about tweaking crap all the time? Lord of the Rings has, all of the rails have a jumped up ball system. It's hard to explain this unless you've actually seen it. The ball rolls into a drop, like a drop hole, and then the drop hole kicks the ball up, and the ramp catches it. The rails catch it, and it directs the ball onto the rail, and then the ball goes down the rail. Already, even though the machine was in really new condition, the lower left hand playfield ball, the ball kickback to pop it up onto the rails was already starting to fail. Sometimes it would take 2 or 3 times to get the ball up there. And I was thinking to myself, from an owner's perspective, I wouldn't want to own a pinball machine where all of the railing systems and everything were so complicated that you'd spend way too much time maintaining it. I don't want to do that.
Unless you know how to fix pinball machines, and that's your thing.
Well, even so,
a lot of people have fun. A lot of people who buy pinball machines have a lot of fun fixing them.
That's not me, though.
It seems like they have more fun fixing them than playing them.
I would rather be playing myself.
So that's me too.
What do I know?
The last thing I want to do is fix a pinball machine.
I don't like taking my glass off.
Yeah, please, you see the tears in my eyes every time I take the glass off the pinball machine, change the bulb or something.
But I will admit that that some of the things were pretty neat. There were a couple of little things in there that were worth noting. I think we got them on the notes. Brian, why don't you whip through the notes here that we took and see if we missed anything?
You said the game was easy.
Oh, man. I forgot about that.
You got like 14 million on the first ball?
I got like 14 million on the first ball. I had a free game on the first ball. And I had an extra ball on the first ball. And
you got like all the multi-ball.
I got the multi-ball like twice. It wasn't very difficult. You could say, well, you just said it was complex and, hard to read. I'm not saying it wasn't easy to score a lot of points. I'm saying you didn't feel like you were accomplishing anything because you didn't know.
You were accidentally stumbling upon everything.
Exactly. You were stumbling across what you were supposed to do. And the point system was so generous. And I'll tell you, it was really hard to lose the ball. The side drop slots are small. The space between the flippers is small. It's an easy pin in terms of losing the ball. And of course, the longer you keep the ball on there, the more points you're going to score, the more chance you are going to even be accidentally finishing the missions. So yeah, I thought it was way too easy of a table in terms of points. Too generous, the point department. What else we got?
Tell me about the multi-ball.
What was it about the multi-ball?
Apparently, every time I talk to somebody about Lord of the Rings, they say the multi-ball is the bomb.
I missed out on that. I got the multi-ball like 4 times, I think, while I was playing, and I didn't get it.
You didn't understand the draw.
I didn't understand what made that multi-ball any different than any other multi-ball. Now, it's a 4-ball multi-ball, which a lot of people may not have seen, and the extra ball could have been throwing people into a frenzy. I don't know. My Bone Busters has a 4-ball multi-ball, and it doesn't faze me to see Lord of the Rings have a 4-ball multi-ball. But there's a lot of pinball machines that really work your ass up in multi-ball mode, where they're constantly telling you to do stuff, and the music is charging you up like Star Wars. My favorite, shoot the Death Star.
I love that.
I love that. But there's some games that really build on the multi-ball. I think Black Knight 2000 does that. It gets all freaked out when the music starts pumping and you start getting all worked up. This just totally left me flat in that department.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't.
Did you know what to do though in the multi-ball?
Well, no. Of course, again, the same problem with the table. You don't know what to do. All you're doing is worrying about keeping the balls alive. And even so, I was trying to listen for the cues to see where I could put things. Mm-hmm. No cues. So I would have had to have been watching the dot matrix the whole time to decide what to do. The playfield was not intuitive. I guess that's the best way to sum it up.
Do you feel that if you had a copy of the rule set or read the rule set before you played the pinball machine, you would have appreciated it more?
I don't know. That's a tough call. It looks like like I said, they tried to stuff every possible element of the film into this thing, be it through rule set, be it through missions, be it through animated characters, be it through dot matrix. It's like we have got to fit everything into this machine, and I feel that they spent too much energy on that. The Simpsons is a good pinball machine in terms of theming it without overdoing it.
Yeah,
that's a good example of, especially of a Stern machine, where you get to hear Abu, you get to hear Bart, you get to hear everybody, but it's not like, God, we got to get Abu in here. What are we going to do? How are we going to make that happen?
Right.
So that it felt kind of pushed together for me, but what do I know? I'm just a pinball enthusiast. What other notes we got on there? I know we took a bunch of notes on Lord of the Rings.
Just you complaining about the too much playfield real estate.
Lots of real estate. Too much real estate. I like to keep things a little tighter.
Like I guess you got to the Witch King and nothing led up to show you how to kill the Witch King.
I couldn't figure out. They shoot the Witch King, and I sat there staring at the playfield trying to figure out what to do. I hate that. Help me out.
My biggest complaint about the machine is that it's one of those classic. Let's hide the targets and stuff on top of, put plastics on top of the targets like the bumpers.
Yeah. A lot of stuff you couldn't see.
You can't see, did you know that you could change the lanes up? Did you know there were even lanes?
Yeah, I knew there were lanes. I finally saw the lanes up there while I was watching you play.
Yeah.
But and I figured you could probably change them. But, like you said, you wouldn't even see those.
Right.
Unless you sat there with a magnifying glass and scoped the whole table out.
Right. So, some of us don't have the luxury of buying a Lord of the Rings and taking the thing apart and finding where everything is and putting it back together.
Oh, there's where the drop hole is. I see it. Yeah.
Because I have to admit, with Adam's Family, I took the glass off and I bought mine because it was at one point one of those machines where I remember first playing Adam's Family and going, I hate this pen. I hate it with a passion. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And I literally had to take the glass off. I downloaded the rule set, took off the glass, and I was like, okay, that's where this is, that's where that is, that's where this is. And that's when I enjoyed it. Maybe that's Lord of the Rings, maybe that's the pin that you have to do it, but if you're just somebody who's going to an arcade and has wants to play a pinball machine, and since Stern is the only one making pinball machines, and that's the only thing that's there, I mean, my movie theater has Lord of the Rings right now, and that's it. And if you want to play pinball, that's the pinball machine to play because
that's the only one.
That's the only one. That's one of the things that really irks me about Stern. They know they're the only ones on the block, so they just know they can just do whatever the hell they want. And what's really sucks is that they managed to get all the great Williams designers to make these tables, and I guess the rumors I've heard, the stories I've heard is they get Pat Lawler or Steve Ritchie in there, and they come up with this idea, and then they Sternize the table.
Sternize. Run it through the Stern machine.
Yeah, and half the stuff doesn't make it in there, or they cheapen up the playfield, or do something really to cheapen it up, or cut things for cost, and it might say Pat Lawler's name on it, but it doesn't feel like a Pat Lawler machine, even though Monopoly does to me. But I can't remember who did Lord of the Rings.
I know Steve Ritchie had a hand in Terminator 3.
Yeah, you can tell.
You could tell. I mean, if you got that feeling about it, maybe that's one of the reasons I liked it. I didn't know about it when I first played that. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anything about the pin when I first went to it, and then I found out later that it was Steve Ritchie. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's always a good thing. Any other notes that we got on that?
I wrote down reuse of very similar ideas from other pins, patchwork. It's attack from bars and scramble hardware.
No, I wrote that.
Oh.
I thought you were losing your mind, weren't
you? Cues are too based on the dot matrix. I'm sorry. When the day comes I can play pinball and read the dot matrix display, maybe I'll go back and play Lord of the Rings.
But even so,
I've lost the ball so many times trying to figure out what ball I'm on with my squares on other pinball machines. There's no way in the world I'm going to sit there and try to read the dot matrix display and look at 5 balls shooting all over the playfield at the same time. Can't do it.
Yeah, and even the times when you are watching the dot matrix when somebody else is playing,
you still don't know what's going on.
You still don't know what's going on. They tell you what happened,
yeah,
but not necessarily what to do. I think that's probably my biggest hang up with it.
I don't even think there's anything like, okay, you got this, shoot it 3 more times and you'll get this.
Yeah, I didn't notice any of that.
I don't think there was any of that in Lord of the Rings.
There was, you know what? The Walk of the Dead or whatever, I think had that.
You
did I say
Walk
Path
of the Dead? You said Walk of the Dead.
Damn. Walk of the, we're going to rename it officially. We're going to write to Stern and say you need to rename it to Walk of the Dead. Now that seemed to have a charge up thing where you could. But yeah, it's not like 5 more bear clicks, 4 more bear clicks, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I like those. I like. Maybe we're just getting too old to appreciate this. It's what this is. This is like video games that have to have this big giant story behind it. It's the same idea.
Well, all pinball. Well, every pinball machine after Adam's Family has always had a storyline behind it.
Well, yeah, but this one it's like the story's more important than the pinball instead of complementing it.
But you don't know what the story is. It's not actually telling the story. It's just you hit targets and things happen.
That's the way. But it doesn't feel like it. It's like everybody's in on it, but you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you didn't see the movie, you don't have a clue how to play the pin. If you saw the movie, you know what to do.
Well, I don't know if you even know what to do, but at least the stuff makes sense. The monster jumping out. I'm sure if we were fans of the movie, we could identify who that
We'd be
monster
like,
was.
that's cool. Well, my wife played it, and she thinks it's the worst pinball machine ever made, and she basically said, if you ever do a review of Lord of the Rings, just say it sucks and
say thank you.
And thank you.
It sucked, thank you.
And she loves Lord of the Rings. She's like you retard geekos on that listen to the show and freaking go on IRC and talk about this stuff all day. She's got the books. She forced me to go out and get the movies.
Lord of the Rings, the lunchbox. Lord of the Rings, the flamethrower. Lord of the Rings, the paperback.
And to me, I was like, if anybody's going to love this pinball machine, it would be her. I'm just like, it's Lord of the Rings. How can you hate something that you're obsessed about?
You'll love it before you even put money in.
Yeah, you love it just by looking at it. She looked at it and she's like, what the hell is this?
Too complicated.
No, she was just like, I don't like this. I remember the first time we played it, we got to we played it to ball 2. And we were like, oh, shoot, there's one more ball left. She's like,
I don't want to play it.
I don't want to play it anymore. I said, we got to finish the game. Yeah.
That's not right.
Then we won a game. I was like, let's just walk away.
Now we got to play it again.
We walked away, dude.
That's what I was talking about with Terminator 3. It's like you wanted to finish playing the credits. It's not like, screw it. I don't want to play anymore. I'm done with it.
So, and I thought maybe she was just in a bad mood that day. Every time we see that thing, she hisses at it like a cat. So. She doesn't like Lord of the Rings. Mrs. Hype says,
2 thumbs down. That all our notes? That all we got for Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
We don't want to make these pinball segments too long. We want to kind of...
Dang, this is long.
I know. That's why we sit here and yap through the whole thing. But, yeah, that's Lord of the Rings. Overall, I wouldn't own one. I would probably play it again.
Maybe we need to download the rules or something. I was told that we need to go on the Alt-Rex pinball and
check out the rule
set. But
to me though, the best pinballs have always been ones that you can pick up and play
and figure it out,
and at least not feel like you're lost. There's always a growing up period with pinball,
right?
But there's always there's always missions that are novice level missions, Like the
easy
RPG,
to get stuff.
There's certain things that give you instant gratification. There's some things that give you gratification just by keeping the ball alive, and then there's some gratification that requires that you have the full rule set downloaded into your brain directly. But in this case, it was like it's all the latter. You've got to have a solid understanding of the theme. You got to have a solid understanding of the rule set. You got to have a solid understanding of the pinball physics. It seemed like it was too advanced, and they made it. They went out of their way to make it so. But that's just me.
I have nothing more to tell you.
Well, that'll wrap it up for this look at the Lord of the Rings pinball from Stern. We hope you enjoy this and other pinball segments we'll be having on future shows. We hope you enjoyed our first Pinball Parlor segment. Look for more Pinball Parlor segments in future episodes of Retro Gaming Radio. I'd like to discuss a little retraction from last month's show. Apparently I came down on the fact that arcade folks were putting Linux-based hardware into arcade systems, and I mindlessly said that that wasn't a popular thing, that putting common PC hardware into gaming systems or arcade cabinets was not a common thing. I was pointed out on numerous accounts at how wrong I was. I'm still not going back on my concept, though,
that by putting in specific hardware, you are limiting yourself to specific styles of games. And I don't think that's going to change. I will stand by my ground there. I'll admit when I'm wrong, but the concept behind my argument I feel is still valid. Part of what makes the arcade experience so cool is the fact that you are not limited to an Xbox, or you're not limited to a PlayStation 2 hardware. You're not limited to the PC internals and the PCI bus and all of the other restrictions that come along with using specific hardware slanted for a different platform. And I'm going to hold true to that. And I truly believe, especially after reading some of the interviews with like Eugene Jarvis, he basically came out and said, you know, part of what makes making an arcade game great is if I need something else, I can throw it in there. If I need more video memory, I can throw it in there. If I need a faster through bus, I can put it in there. If I need a faster this or an extra one of those or a change out of this, I'm not limited. I have no restrictions on me whatsoever other than, you know, end cost of development. But when you take an Xbox and shove it in an arcade cabinet, you are putting limits on what you can do. When you take a Linux-based PC board and stuff it in an arcade cabinet, you are limiting what you can do. I don't think that's the right way to approach the arcade. I think what made the arcade magical is erasing the rules every 6 to 12 months and saying, we're going to do something different. We're going to do something new. And I don't think you can really do something new if you're using 3-year-old hardware or 2-year-old hardware or even last year's hardware. So I'm going to let that motion go through, but I did want to make sure that everybody knew I was responsible and said that, in retracting my statement that it's not common practice to use common hardware inside of arcade cabinets, that was my mistake. However, I will stand by my concept. I think putting common hardware inside of arcade cabinets is not the right way to do it. I'd like to take a quick moment to thank Retro Gamer Magazine for providing us with an outlet to send the Retro Gaming Radio show out to their thousands of subscribers over in the United Kingdom. Big welcome to all of our listeners overseas who are hearing us for the first time. Compliments of Retro Gamer Magazine. Those of you who are interested in the magazine, it's actually available at Fry's Electronics locally here in the United States. You can also, of course, get a subscription. They give away some nice little goodies with their subscriptions. And you can look for the banner on the front page of Retro Gaming Radio. It'll tell you how to get a 10% off discount of that subscription. We're really pleased with the magazine, and we're happy to be aligned with them in some fashion. They're producing good content, the kind of stuff that we read and we appreciate. So we're really glad to be affiliated with them. So definitely check out the magazine, check out their website. We'll have a link for you. And again, I want to welcome all the new listeners. Many of you have already written in from last month's issue, and we're real excited to have you. You know, it's really nice to have an alternative ear from overseas. Although we've had several listeners from overseas before, a lot of them where was it? Norway, we've got some, Sweden, pretty much everywhere over across the pond we have listeners. But we have a real soft spot for our UK listeners, being that the Amiga was real big over there. And that's, where a lot of the source of a lot of my livelihood came from in the 90s. So, again, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Retro Gamer Magazine staff and readers. We're glad to have you here. Well, folks, I think that's going to wrap up the show. I'd like to give a big thanks out to Retro Gamer Magazine for all of their affiliation and support. We'd like to thank all of our listeners, old and new. You guys are who really makes this show happen. We'd like to thank SpeedHost.com, the eternal hosts of our show and our site and everything else. You guys are the best. As always, if you need good quality hosting at a good price, SpeedHost.com. And, of course, I would like to take a special moment to thank everybody who's contributed to the show over the last few months. You guys have been awesome, and we should have named you specifically off in the Bits and Bytes section, but I want to thank you once again for sending us all this cool stuff, and for all of you who send encouraging emails, especially when I was ill. That was really nice of you guys to send that out. We really appreciate it. This is Shane R. Monroe behind the microphone with Brian Kid Smith behind the mixing board saying until next time, keep it retro.